we had an evacuation plan. Almost 300 animals that we are trying to get out of Kabul before America leaves. The United States government would not support any sort of a mission. The only way to get a mission carried out was for us to take it on ourselves. So imagine we're still in Afghanistan. We've just left Bagram, so logistically because that was where you could pull off a whole lot of evacuations and exits. And with that gone, we're just focusing on H-Kaya, and there's very little you can do out of that airport. We think we're gonna be okay. We think we might be able to make it work. But the commander says to us, hey, we've gotta go quiet. Something bad's about to happen. We said, what are you talking about? What do you mean? And he goes, just in 10 minutes, turn on CNN. And that's when Abbey Gate blew up.
When hunting isn't about hunting at all. Team Dog features comprehensive and customizable meal plans with dry and raw food options to meet your dog's unique nutritional needs, including digestive sensitivities, allergies, or selective eating. Did you know combining 75% dry food with 25% raw food delivers robust, nutrient-dense meals for your dog? Be your dog's hero with Team Dog. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He's the founder of Marley's Mutts Rescue and Positive Change Prison Dogs program. He's an advocate for prison reform and second chance initiatives. He's also Ben Affleck's stunt double. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Zach Skow. You have to get that a lot.
I've gotten it a few times, man. Yeah. One time I was in an airport. Well, first of all, thank you for having me, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's a real honor. You're a heck of a dude, man. No. Like I said before, thank you across the board for everything you've done for the used dog community. You know, this is something that with what you're engaged in, you really help bring more eyeballs and a whole different genre of individuals to this cause by doing what you've done. So
I appreciate it.
And thanks, man.
Yeah. Oh, and likewise, because there is a strange synergy between what you guys do and what we do. And while it's on polar ends of the spectrum, in the niche of the dog industry, you know, from the outsider looking in, they're pretty related. And so I think it's mutually beneficial. But what's the last full book that you've read?
Oh boy, the last full book that I read was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I read that recently because I'm trying to build, I'd read it a bunch of times before, but I'm trying to build some prison programming, novel prison dog programming around that book.
Yeah. And
Man's Search for Meaning is a remarkable book. Viktor Frankl wrote it essentially about his experience in concentration camps. He was a doctor of psychology, lost his entire family, and it really follows him through that whole process, including the darkest, dankest, most depressing scenarios that you can possibly imagine, and how he found purpose in his suffering, you know, and how he was able to really leverage that, the purpose he was able to mine from his suffering, to not just get on with life, but to help others and succeed past that suffering.
Would you say that's your biggest takeaway from it?
I think as it applies to what I'm doing in prison, yeah, because what I really see is so many of my students are what we call LWOP, life without parole, or facing, you know, really long terms in prison. They've been inside for decades, and where they can get most emotionally and spiritually destitute is when they lose sight of purpose. And so really trying to remind guys that there's always purpose, and there's, in fact, tremendous purpose in the suffering that they're going through, and it can really help refocus them. There's a lot of service to do in prison. There's a lot of service that you can do for that I see my guys doing all the time. I mean, some of my guys spend decades serving other individuals in that prison, but for a lot of them, it's really hard to get outside of the idea that that their life is over and that there's nothing to be hopeful for, nothing to be, you know, excited about or to find purpose in. And this book really shows you that, you know, you can find purpose in your suffering to a great degree.
That's awesome. I'll have to check it out. I've not read it, but it sounds fascinating. What's something you wish you were better at?
Communicating. Yeah.
Really? I mean, you seem like a pretty good communicator.
Well, I think anybody who's been through a divorce will learn that, and it really has pushed me into a place where I'm extraordinarily receptive to figuring out how to communicate better. And I'm not saying that I'm a bad communicator, but I'm very direct, which is what my dad taught me. My dad's a aeronautical engineer who worked with the military his entire life. So everything is very direct. Everything is very emotional. And sometimes I can get into trouble with being too direct. And also trying to win the argument. One thing I've learned in terms of my communications, I don't need to win the argument.
Well, yeah, I would take it even a step further. I think winning the argument generally doesn't mean that you won, if you want to call it a battle or the situation, and it's usually the opposite.
Yeah, exactly.
If time travel were possible, where and when would you go?
Oh, man, time travel. If time travel were possible, I think I would go to the Wild West, man. I'd go to the Old West, west of the Mississippi, maybe just after the Civil War.
Are you Wyatt Earp or are you on the other side?
Oh, I'm definitely the Billy the Kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely Billy the Kid.
Yeah, I don't doubt
Only
that.
because, I grew up in, my mom owned a video. My mom was an executive at Disney and ABC. She, no college degree, became one of the youngest executives and female executives at that company. She didn't spend a lot of time with us as a mother because she was a working executive. And she left that work and opened a video store.
Oh, no shit.
So that she could spend time with us and not be part of the corporate way of life.
Was that like at the height of the Michael Eisner era?
This was in the early 90s.
Okay. I don't know when.
Late 80s, early 90s. And Young Guns came out. So, of course, I've seen that movie a million times, followed all the different,
Yeah.
So whenever it comes to, I'm a huge history guy. So when it comes to teleporting back to any time in history, there's any number of scenarios that I get really excited about. I love history. I love not just the idea of history, but culturally planting yourself in a place that's different and having to understand how things work.
Would you say that is your favorite history period?
I think in terms of America, anything having to do with that Gilded Age, the late 1800s into the early 1900s, and through Roosevelt's administration, where America's really getting its identity, and with national parks and different conflicts and expansion and the move west and all that things, it just seems like an extraordinarily exciting time to be part of America.
Yeah. I imagine, just like anything else, though, there's a funny quote from The Office. I don't know if you watch The Office or not, but I think it's Andy Bernard says it, where I wonder if when you're in the good old days, you know it. Oh, yeah. I wonder if they had any grasp on the gravity of where they were at, and the profound nature of impact that what was taking place historically then would have the impact that it's had on the world today. Sure. I can't imagine they could have grasped that, but
I think about us Gen Xers, though, man.
Yeah.
What our life was like as kids in the 80s and 90s.
I think we have the best deal.
Totally.
Yeah. Because it's we grew up before cell phones, but we were young enough when smartphones were introduced to get them and really enjoy and take advantage of them, But
I love that part of the 80s, and I really think that we knew it was a special time.
For sure, yeah. I look back on it almost depressing nostalgia-wise all the time.
Especially from a parenting metric, because I was raised at the beach. I grew up at the beach. We were just feral children who just were unleashed on our community for day after day after day.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So you're originally from California?
Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
Born and raised in Hermosa Beach, California.
Okay.
Just south of LAX.
Yeah.
South Bay is what it's called. Redondo, Manhattan, Hermosa Beaches.
Yeah. Quite different back then than it is now, I suspect.
A lot different, yeah. Back then, Hermosa Beach still had this kind of debris meets the sea feel, where it wasn't so affluent, and there were still pier rats under the pier selling and doing drugs. And we still had, back then we had, groups that would come cross PCH, come into the South Bay territory. So you had a lot of mixture of some gangs, and then it was very diverse and still affordable. Yeah. Not so much like Manhattan Beach, which has always been out of reach, but certainly now Hermosa. That whole area of the South Bay has really gotten expensive and unattainable. Yeah. It'd be very difficult to move back now, let's put it that way.
Other than being a feral child unleashed on the community, how would you kind of synopsize your childhood?
Oh, wow. So Hermosa Beach is like a bubble. It's a very cultivated kind of community. So when you grow up in the South Bay, you don't ever go really east of PCH, and you don't really go north of LAX, and you don't go south of Palos Verdes. So you're raised in this bubble where you have everything you need, and you're at the beach constantly. So my entire life was spent at the beach, in the water, skateboarding, surfing, biking. My mom tells this funny story when we first moved to the beach, like right next to the beach. I grew up in a home with 2 single mothers. So my mom, my twin brother, Sue and her family, and then we had a lot of mixed in people. It's the only way we could afford to live at the beach is multiple families living in one home. And my mom tells this funny story about when we'd first moved in and we got back from school, and she said, no matter what you do, don't go to the beach without an adult, okay? So come home from school, don't go to the beach without an adult. And she comes home, and we're not home, and she comes and finds us down at the beach, and I'm in the water, my brother's on the beach, and she goes, Jeffrey Wagner Skow, what did I tell you about coming to the beach without any adults? And he goes, Mom, look around. There's adults everywhere.
That's awesome.
We're fine. We were like 8, 9.
So your name isn't Zach?
Oh, that was my brother.
Oh,
Jeff.
I got you.
Just my twin brother. Who I was,
Man, I can only imagine. I mean, because I grew up in Iowa, same time period, but I wouldn't say it was rural, but it was like a suburb without the city, there's no big city. So it was just, there was far less to do, so really our beach, so to speak, was either like playgrounds or parks and construction sites, like of housing developments that were half built, and just, getting into trouble in there and setting traps and fucking around. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. We had a lot of room to get into a lot of trouble. Places like Rat Beach and Torrance, where you can kind of hide behind the cliffs and have bonfires, and there's any number of things to have fun with.
Did you get into trouble as a kid a lot?
I didn't get into trouble too much. It was kind of more difficult to get into trouble when you grew up at the beach because it was such a free lifestyle. Yeah. You had such a long leash to go do what you wanted to do, have fun. We're such latchkey kids that we're just wandering around constantly. Didn't get into too much legal trouble. I got like drunk in public, things like that. Urinating in public, little things like that when I was 15, 14, things like that. But for the most part, the trouble I started to get into was always, don't get me wrong. I broke the law many, many times throughout my teenage years and early 20s, but never got in a lot of trouble, no.
I assume you graduated high school and went on to, did you go on to college?
I did. I went to San Diego State
for
a while, and then I got booted out of there.
What years were you there?
97 to 99.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I doubt that we ran into each other, but I lived in the college area. I don't remember the name of the street. Yeah, like in that time period.
Interesting. Yeah, I was there for a little more than a year. I got kicked out for grades, and by that time I was drinking every night, and I was smoking weed every night. We lived in an apartment complex with a bunch of like-minded individuals. So weed was, different drugs were coming and going out of the apartment constantly. You get involved in all that subculture, and skateboarding around campus with my buddy Todd, and just not taking it seriously. And believe it or not, really what was underneath it all was this like extraordinary anxiety and lack of confidence within myself. I didn't believe I could do it for whatever reason, and therefore I would much rather spend time kind of with my friends out and about, and kind of pursuing oblivion, because that was more comfortable. That was more of a comfortable place for me to be in than otherwise. When I put tremendous amounts of pressure on myself. And one of the things about me is I found it really difficult to perform under pressure. It's one of the reasons I didn't succeed in sports, is because I would get so hard on myself. So like tragically hard on myself, unnecessarily hard on myself. And that pressure would dissuade me from being effective.
Did you ever eat at Wings and Things?
No.
No? What was the name of that pizza place that was like really cool? Do you know?
Oh man, I don't know. I had so little money when I was in school there. Like I very rarely ate out, let's put it that way, unless it was a California burrito place.
Yeah. So what was your plan, I guess, in graduating high school and going to San Diego State? Like, did you have a life plan at that point, or were you just
No. The only two things I can remember ever wanting to do when I was that age is I wanted to be a history teacher. I thought, I don't remember if it was a counselor or somebody sat me down and said, like, what are you interested in and what do you enjoy talking about? Sharing with people. I loved history. I just loved everything about history and antiquity and learning about it and learning from our mistakes and culturally comparing things and all the rest of it. But I grew up in a sort of military household. My dad's an aeronautical engineer at the time for Northrop. My dad was a intermediary between the Air Force and test pilots at Northrop and for the USAF. And so I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I had a lot of grandiose ideas in that arena that I probably knew were never going to come to fruition, especially without putting in the effort.
Yeah.
But if you were to have asked me when I was a kid, that's what I would have said. I would have wanted to be a fighter pilot. My dad owned a company called Idetics that was focused on not just aeronautical engineering, but all kinds of different things within the defense industry. And a bunch of his employees were the Top Gun pilots for the movie.
So no shit.
Carrot.
That's
His
cool.
call sign was Carrot. A bunch of those guys
Yeah.
would come and go while the movie was being filmed. And
Oh, that's wild.
yeah,
That's super cool.
yeah.
Would you say that substance abuse or any addiction issues were present in college, or was that later?
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
I knew, I went through some things in childhood that really affected my comfortability with women. So when I started to become attracted to women, which was most of my life, I had a really, really difficult time being around them. I would have fight or flight nervous system reactions that were terrifying, like where my brain is telling me I have to get out of here. I have to get out of here. I went through experiences as a child with, being taken advantage of by a woman that made me terrified to be around women. And I was so young when that happened, between like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and where it really made me terrified to be in any sort of situation where intimacy or attraction, any of those feelings you get when you're excited to be around a woman, I would get both excited and also terrified.
Was it an adult female?
Yeah. And so moving forward, I would get those feelings constantly. And I was an attractive kid. So my friends and other people in school were always trying to connect me with older girls. And you're getting all this pressure to act as if, and and the only thing that made me feel anywhere near comfortable was alcohol.
Are you comfortable talking about what happened with that?
Yeah, to a degree. I think hard one, man. The hard one that I haven't fully processed. I mean, I've processed it to a tremendous degree from where I had before, and I feel so much more comfortable moving on, having like identified all of this and worked through it and sat with a therapist and talked about it ad nauseum. And so I feel so grateful that the same anxieties and the same pain and the same fight or flight isn't as present, isn't as there, but it's really difficult for me to talk about the particulars.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't blame you. Do you mind if I ask just if it was a sexual abuse kind of thing or something different?
What's tough is it wasn't like overt sexual abuse that included penetration or anything like that, but it was intimate scenarios that were not appropriate that happened regularly. And it was also tied into my need as a young man to be strong and to be there for someone who needed me. So the way this situation unfolded was I'm being there for this person who needs me, and I just need to sit strong and I need to be strong and I'll get through this. And this is what this person who I care about needs, and I'm trying to help them through what they're going through. But for me, it was agonizing. Even in the scenarios, I remember just sitting there, kind of. And again, this is not like overt sexual penetration or terrible abuse, which is a big part of why I never identified it, is because it didn't check the boxes as something that was so obvious. But it was something that I unpacked with a therapist many, many years ago, and she had to kind of walk me through, and I had to let out, kind of like you're doing now, the bits and pieces of what occurred. And she said, we need to sit and talk about this. And I think this could be a big part of what you're experiencing in terms of like enveloping anxiety. Like I'd have enveloping anxiety in intimate situations where my body would shut down.
Was that immediately, like the very first time you ever were around women of your peer group that, and is that when you kind of
Yeah, I'll never
realize
forget it. There's a couple different situations where I was doing these, like, trying to do these romantic deals with a local girl, and one of them, Shauna was her name, and I'm trying to be what I know is a polite, strong man, and create these they're like little dates that
Yeah.
that my I would try to facilitate, and as soon as we'd have almost chemistry, as soon as the chemistry would initiate, I would fall apart.
oh wow,
Because it's like with the feeling of intimacy is, and honestly, brother, I wish I could unpack it in a better way that is like really thoroughly honest and vulnerable. It just, I don't know how to do it, and I'll probably break down to the degree where I can't talk through it.
yeah. No, I mean, my goal certainly isn't to put you on the therapy couch and and
I mean, to a degree, right?
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to go full Dr. Phil on you. Just to me, if you think about, or at least from my perspective, when I look at your life as a collective, and so much of what you do now stems from your experiences with addiction, and that stems from that. So, to me, because it's such a huge component
for sure,
and connection to, where you're at even today, in providing kind of a context or backdrop for the viewer and listener.
Sure.
I think those things are important,
Absolutely,
so, but no, again, I'm not.
And it's one of those things that if I hadn't really sat with a therapist, a couple different therapists, and worked through that, I have no idea what my life would be like.
Yeah.
Because I was incapable of being a partner, and it was a couple of years after I was able to work this that I met who's now my ex-wife, but met my wife, and we were able to have two beautiful kids, and I know that I'm capable of all of these things now.
Yeah.
But I also think in terms of my alcoholism, like my grandfather died of alcoholism at 41. My dad was 15. He was in World War II, Korea, re-enlisted. I have a bunch of pictures of him. I have some really wonderful stories about him, as a matter of fact. I never met him, obviously. He died in 1961. But his legacy definitely affected me in a very deep way. And I have a fun way, if you want me to talk about it, where he sort of reached out from the grave.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to hear
in my time of need. So I know you probably had a different way planned to address like this topic in terms of my recovery and what happened with my whole life. But after I was diagnosed with end-stage liver disease, I was given less than 90 days to live. Got checked into the hospital for extended care, and it was this really challenging process of getting sicker and sicker and sicker in the hospital and trying to get into a hospital that did liver transplant.
How old were you at that time?
I was 28. And I was desperate. My dad was desperate to find help for me. He was the only, as an engineer, his brain wouldn't give up on his kid, and he was going to find a tactful way to make this work. And we were going to work around whatever parameters existed and find a way in, and luckily I got admitted to a transplant program at Cedars-Sinai. I didn't end up getting a transplant, but when I got home from the hospital, I'd been in there for a long time. I was 140 pounds. I was completely yellow and purple, just covered in bruises, huge belly, ascites, catheter in my back, ammonia buildup on my brain, so not making a lot of sense. I would kind of vacillate between here and there. And when I got home, I had to kick drugs that I got addicted to in the hospital, which was awful, going through Dilaudid and morphine withdrawal. Thank God with my dogs, with my big Rottweiler pit bull sitting next to me, I would just feel his breath go up and down and like help root me in reality, because I was seeing and hearing things that were not there, that were but I was in this very suicidal rut where I was so helpless, and I didn't look like I was going to survive, and I couldn't deal with that reality, and I couldn't understand what was happening to me. And there wasn't so much of a why me, but just I was really, really lost. And when you don't have any control, suicide becomes like something you can control. Yeah. So I quickly obsessed with that, and when my dad would leave, I'd go up to his room and rack his 9 and pop all the bullets out and put them back in, and daydream about what I was going to do to help my family, rid them of this like constant emotional, spiritual scourge that was me, that was just sucking life out of everybody. because I saw what it was doing. It was blatantly obvious to see like how detrimental I was to everybody around me. I was a complete liability. And I had to go to meetings. I had to go to recovery meetings to fax that to the transplant hospital. I had to, I was there on a liver card. In order to get my liver transplant, which is what I was trying to work towards, I needed to go to a meeting every single day, and I had to fax that to them. So I was going to meetings. They'd given me the books and stuff, and one day in a particularly like dark time where I was really, really feeling like there was no way out, and that this was the only way out. Going through my grandmother's things in the closet downstairs, which is in the room I was sleeping in. And as soon as I open this box, I see the 24-hour day book sitting on top of the box. And I know exactly what this book is because they just gave me one. And I open it, and it's, this old, ancient 24-hour day book, and there's a social security card in it from Kermit Alden Skow. That's my grandfather. And my dad never mentioned his dad. And when he did, it was terrible. He was an alcoholic. He wasn't part of his life. He didn't cry when he found out that he died. Again, he died of liver failure in 1961 at the age of 41. Scrolling through this book, I find another piece of paper that has some writing on it. It says 7:30 Cadillac. And then it's marked. It's ribbon marked, the date. Because the 24-hour day book has a thought, a prayer, and a meditation for the day, every single day of the calendar. So I find this thing. I'm going, holy cow! I take it off to my dad, and I'm dying of liver failure at the time. I got very little hope, and I'm looking to clutch onto anything. I walk out of the living room, I hand my dad this book, and he goes, he starts flicking through it, and he goes, it's marked, and I could see him get visibly shaken, and he opens it and he says, it's marked. I go, no, what is that? He goes, it's marked July 3rd. I go, what was July 3rd? He goes, that's the day he died. So my grandfather was reading this book, dying of liver failure, the day he died, July 3rd, 1961. Here I am, it's October 2008. I'm dying of liver failure, and I find this book. And I'll never forget, I took it to a meeting that night, and my sponsor knew exactly what the scribbled piece of paper was. It said Friedman, had some numbers, and it said 7:30 Cadillac. He goes, Friedman was his sponsor. Phone numbers back then only had 5 digits. And the 7:30 Cadillac is the 7:30 men's stag meeting on Cadillac Street in downtown Los Angeles. Oh my God, we passed the book around the room, and everybody got the heebie-jeebies. And it's still like my prized possession. I think about it all the time. The best part about it, man, the best part about this whole thing is that my dad never had a relationship with his dad. He never got to be loved by his dad. I attached myself to the legacy of this man because we had such parallel stories. And I developed a relationship with this man in recovery because I needed a God of my understanding, and I didn't have one. So I would think about this Skow, this man who passed away, this old white guy in the sky, and I would practice connecting with a power greater than myself that way. And what his memory was able to do for me in recovery, my dad really appreciated. So that's been really special to watch my dad develop a relationship with his dad, albeit spiritual one, because of what he's meant to me.
Yeah. Do you think that there's any part of you developing a relationship with your grandfather that bothered your dad because of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
First off, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. That's really spot on because that was, especially considering my dad's nature. My dad is a chin up, shoulders back, chest out, move forward, lemons out of lemonade always. And, it was really sad also to know that my dad never had that support. And it really wore on him, I think, for his whole life. I can't imagine. Sometimes I like to think, well, what my dad would be like had he been loved by his father.
Yeah.
Because he had no example. He's got 2 twin sons, and he had no example for how to do that, how to be he is an amazing father, but he had no example for how to do so. And I know he really resented his dad. And I think he really loved his mom, and he saw what it did to his mother. And I think most of his resentment wasn't as a son, but as the son of his mother and watching what she went through. We have tons of pictures from him in World War II, in Morocco, and in Europe, and in Korea, and almost every picture is in a bar with 2 drinks in his hand. In some case, we have lots of
my dad's dad was that same way. He's in the Army in the Mediterranean in World War II, and and was a raging alcoholic his whole life. But I am curious. I mean, with your grandfather having the same issue, is there a genetic component to your liver failure, or is it purely from alcohol?
No, there's no. It's not like That's a good question, but no, my liver failure is not because I have a weak liver whatsoever.
Purely drinking.
Yeah, I drank copious amounts of alcohol 24 hours a day. I got in a car accident in 2003. I fractured my shoulder and broke my sternum. Those are really painful injuries to come back from. It takes a long time to heal. There's no cast. You really just have to be still. Every cough, twitch, sneeze is obnoxiously painful. And so that's when I transitioned into 24-hour a day drinking, where I drank around the clock 24 hours a day. I had very little money though. So, at the end I was drinking a box of wine per day. So that's, 5 liters of alcohol in a bag, in a box.
Yeah.
The
good stuff.
9 bottles of wine a day. It's an astronomical amount of alcohol.
Were you doing any drugs at that point, or was it all drinking?
Yeah. Yeah, I did a lot of cocaine. I got involved in when I moved to Tucson after San Diego, involved in living in the wrong place, hanging out with the wrong people who were manufacturing crack cocaine and selling it out of the apartment, and copious amounts of cocaine, making mostly rock cocaine and distributing it in the area. This is on Miracle Mile in Tucson.
You were, or they were?
Well, I mean, when you're in the same domicile, it's kind of hard not to be associated with all of it. It was out of our place.
So that was before the liver failure, right?
Yeah, I did. I think the first time I did cocaine, I was 16. I was in high school, and a lot of people, were certainly who I hung out with. But I hung out with a lot of people. I had a lot of friends in high school, a lot of different groups that I spent time with. But yeah, I did cocaine. Obviously, transition to methamphetamine when you can no longer afford it. I was never into intravenous drug use, but did just about every drug under the sun, and did it as much as I could.
Yeah. I am curious. I mean, at 28, being diagnosed with stage 4 liver failure and given 90 days to live, what was the first thing that went through your mind when they told you that?
I mean, it's funny that you say that, because when you hear how serious that is, you can hear me talking as a rational, pretty logical person. I had a completely illogical reaction to all of that. It was almost like it wasn't happening to me. You have to keep yourself in a haze. When you're addicted to drugs and alcohol, you have to commit to your scheme, to this fallacy that you're presenting to the world. And I think I had been so out of control for so long, where I didn't feel like I had any control over what was happening around me. I was just along for this drug and alcohol filled adventure, that it didn't really sink in. Initially, it didn't really sink in. I was very good at suppressing what I was feeling with alcohol and drugs. When I went to the hospital and had to detox from alcohol, I don't remember a week that time. That was a really difficult time for my family, especially.
I've lived most of my life pushing through. No matter how I felt, I showed up for our people, for our country, for the teams that count on us. But not long ago, I hit a wall. I was tossing and turning every night and dragging myself through the day, running on fumes, and you just can't lead like that. That's when I found Beam's Dream Powder. Beam is a proudly founded American company and run by people who share our values: hard work, integrity, and delivering results. It's a healthy nighttime blend packed with science-backed ingredients shown to improve sleep so that you can wake up refreshed and ready to take on the day. Beam sent me some to try out, and it flat out works. The first night I was out cold, no staring at the ceiling, no pacing at 3 a.m, no fog when I woke up. I felt sharp, clear, and ready to go. Dream is packed with all natural ingredients: reishi, magnesium, L-theanine, apigenin, and melatonin. It's designed to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling amazing. And unlike other sleep aids, there's no next day grogginess, just great, restful sleep. Plus, Dream tastes incredible, and it's become part of my nightly routine. Simple, easy, and effective. So here's the deal. Beam is giving my listeners the ultimate Patriot discount of up to 40% off. You can try their best-selling Dream Powder and get up to 40% off for a limited time. Go to shopbeam.com/MicDrop and use the code MicDrop at checkout. That's shopbeam.com/micdrop and use code micdrop for up to 40% off. Sleep better, wake up stronger, and show up ready for your family, your work, and your country. Because when you're well rested, you're unstoppable. And this country needs more people like that.
But then also I got addicted to drugs in the hospital immediately. They back then it was the pain chart, pain management was hospital policy. So they point at the pain chart and say, already smiley face, straight face, frowny face, or frowny crying face. And frowny crying face means you get copious amounts of this drug every 3 to 4 hours. So I'm pointing at the cry face every single time. And meanwhile, my kidney, pancreas, and liver are failing. I'm all my filtering mechanisms aren't working, yet they're pumping all this stuff through me. But what I'm getting at is that I never really even had to feel it in the hospital because I was getting frozen plasma transfusions all the time. They were trying to do biopsies. I'm getting endoscopies. You're having all these things done to you. And I looked like the sickest sick person you've ever seen in your life. I mean, I was gray and completely yellow, super thin. You're in a hospital bed for that long. Your muscles start to atrophy. But I think about your question. I think about, what was my initial reaction to hearing that news? And I'm almost embarrassed to say that it didn't really sink in. It didn't really sink in until I was back home and had no drugs and alcohol in my body.
Yeah. I mean, that actually makes a lot of sense because one, the altered state of mind, and two, I think especially at that age, like that's a very irregular or abnormal experience and diagnosis for somebody at 28. And so I can certainly understand the numbness from the influence of chemicals, but also just kind of a denial, disassociated,
Totally.
type of response to it also. I am curious. I mean, so if you didn't get the transplant, they gave you 90 days to live and you're in the final stage. How did you pull out of that?
Yeah. So I was at Bakersfield Memorial for 6 weeks. They don't do liver transplant there. So my story at Memorial really starts when I'm in my hospital room and my dad is desperate to get me into a transplant program. There's 7 hospitals that do transplant at the time. He's desperate. If we can get him into one of these programs, he'll be eligible for full transplant or partial lobe transplant from my twin brother. We have the same chromosome anomalies, et cetera. I could take a transplant from him. But there was no hope of that. You needed 6 months sobriety to qualify for a transplant. I didn't have 6 hours of sobriety. And in my hospital room one day, there's these 3 dudes, and one of them is at the foot of my bed. It looks like a Mormon. He's got a short sleeved, like a Jehovah's Witness kind of a getup, but he's tattooed. And he got through hepatitis C liver failure in prison. And my dad is hearing this guy, and so he's talking to the doctors and saying, so my dad's myopically focused. We're going to get him into one of these hospitals no matter what, even around whatever conditions they have. So he ended up speaking to a nurse at UCLA who, through our insurance, that was really advocating for us. And really out of the blue, we got a meeting at Cedars-Sinai Comprehensive Transplant Center. I was born at Cedars-Sinai. So with this meeting, we have to get there to get admitted to the program, but the doctors won't let us leave the hospital. And so my dad's saying, fuck you guys. We are leaving. I don't care what you say. I will pull the shit out of him myself. We are getting in the car and we are going. They're like, sir, he's too unstable. He's fragile. You can't. So he had to sign all the legal paperwork, sign me out against doctor's orders, and then my mom drove me to Cedars with my dad in tow. And we met with Dr. Tram Tran, who's the incredible woman doctor who was the head of transplant at the time. And she basically said, we're going to admit you into the program, but we're not going to admit you to this hospital. If we admit you to this hospital, you will not leave here. She knew that I would die if they admitted me into the hospital. I mean, if you graphed my health on a chart, I was terribly sick when I went into the hospital, terribly sick. But I got sicker and sicker and sicker every day that I stayed in the hospital.
Because of the pain meds? Or?
I'm getting filled with all kinds of psycho, mental pills, stuff for acute liver failure, kidney, pancreas. All my filtering mechanisms are broken and they're pumping me full of stuff that needs to be filtered. And certainly there was no studies at the time on pain meds and liver failure. So they were just giving it to me every 3-4 hours. I turned into a nightmare because I'm begging the nurses and really giving them a hard time. I end up getting designated as a liability to myself and others. So I have a nurse who's with me 24 hours a day. She's assigned to me. I was not very kind to her. luckily I got to go back and apologize years later. But we got into the program. She sent me home. She said, this is a very close call. I'm going to send you home. You need to stay near an emergency room and do your best. And my dad goes, you're going to send this guy home with me? I'm an engineer. I'm not a nurse. This guy's deathly ill. I can't handle this. It's not something I can deal with. And they're like, sir, this is his best chance. Stay near an emergency room. You're probably going to need it. So I did. I went to the emergency room a few times, convinced my dad because I needed shots of dope. So I just conned him into taking me to the hospital a few times. And then after that, I had to ride it out. So, cleared my system for a couple of days, got through opiate withdrawal, and then, really focused on taking my own life. My entire focus was leaving this planet. And one morning, it was in the middle of the night, really, it was 1, 2 in the morning. I had gone to the bathroom in bed. You end up taking this stuff called lactulose and enulose, which makes you lose your bowels. It's to keep ammonia off your brain. And so I'd gone to the bathroom, and I was walking into the bathroom to clean myself up. I have big full-length mirrors in there. And I remember looking at myself nude, with poop all over me. And I'm completely yellow, and my stomach is 9 months pregnant. I have all these varicose veins. My belly button's herniated. My legs are pencil thin. I have no butt whatsoever. And then I lean in and start looking at my eyes, and I did not recognize my eyes, and no matter how sick you get or how terrified or whatever you're going through, high, drunk, whatever, you could recognize yourself. And I did not recognize what was looking back at me. And I just thought, oh my fucking God, this is a very existential experience because I no longer recognize you. And that must mean this is your last urging to just leave this earth, because this is ridiculous. I'm covered in poop. I can't even clean myself up. And I'm clearly no longer present. I'm no longer in there. And I looked down at my dogs, and this routine was pretty normal, being by the toilet. And Marley, Tug, and Buddy are all sitting there lined up next to the toilet and just looking at me, just wagging their tails, looking at me. And with this deep connection to me, they're staring at me with these just this, it's not even a loving glance. It was just an affirming glance. Like, Dad, we know you're in there. We know you're in there, and it's going to be okay. We know you're in there. I did not know I was in there, and I was so scared. And I was also so scared because I didn't have what it took to take my own life. I was such a chicken shit. And then I'd start to get on myself for that. I'd start to really ride myself for not even being able to take my life. Like, you got one assignment, you can't even complete that. And I just sat with my dogs in the corner and loved on each other. And I journaled that night, finally. It had been recommended of me forever to journal. So I started journaling, and we watched the sun come up. And we did that every single day for months after that, where all I did was dedicate myself to those dogs. So every day was just trying to walk. And when you have ammonia on your brain, you vacillate between present and completely incoherent, where you don't make any sense. You can't put on your shoes. You got no balance. So it was really difficult. I couldn't get far. I still had all this liquid in my belly, but everything was going to be put it on paper and walk and connect to a power, find something, connect with these animals, check yourself out of the situation for a minute and put yourself into them. And because I could understand it. I could understand what they were giving me, this affirmation, they really saw I was in there, and I needed that. I really needed that affirmation. And that's exactly what we set out to do. So every day I started dedicating myself to those dogs and trying to get better and going to meetings. And then, slowly but surely, this is week by week. And I'm having to go to Cedars every week for comprehensive review and testing and all this stuff. And all I'm doing is walking, and I'm getting a little bit better, and I'm getting a little bit better. And then I start adding dogs into my pack. I start volunteering at Dobie SOS and Canine Canyon Ranch, and I start bringing dogs into my pack one at a time, as the weeks go by. And every time I go down to Cedar Sinai, they're saying, all right, you're stable. This is, keep no alcohol, no drugs. They took me off all my medication. So they took me off almost everything. That was another really big moment, was pharmaceutically not abiding by whatever the protocols were telling them, which is he's in liver, kidney, we're going to give him this. They took almost everything off my medical plate they took almost every medication off my plate and allowed my body to start healing. So everything I focused on was health, was what I was putting in my body. So radically changed what I was eating, what I was consuming. And I was just walking and fulfilling dogs. Dogs need enrichment. They need rules, boundaries, exercise, discipline, affection, and love, right? So in the process of giving my dogs rules, boundaries, discipline, exercise, affection, and love, creating this mechanism by which we're rehabilitating foster dogs and we're bringing them into my pack, and I'm trying to help them understand, trying to fulfill them, trying to give myself purpose, them purpose. I just kept getting better and better and better. And it was remarkable. By the time I got 6 months of sobriety, I'd been fostering for several months. I've been walking every single day, usually 4 or 5 times a day. By that time, I could now jog. I'd lost a lot of this weight that had built up from ascites in my stomach. And man, I'll never forget it. At 6 months, that's when I became transplant eligible. And I went down to Cedars and we had a meeting with Tran and her transplant staff. She said, look, dude, we don't know what you've been doing with yourself up there, but whatever you are doing, you need to keep doing it. She said, you are still, end stage, but your bilirubin, your albumin, your INR, your all these liver enzyme and liver protein tests, you're getting profoundly better. And we're not used to seeing this. Usually when you're end stage, you die or you get a transplant. Those are the options. And for me, I just kept getting better and better and better. I've been a member of that program now for almost 17 years. I still go down every 6 months. My next one is on the 22nd. We do comprehensive liver MRI or endoscopies or any number of tests to see how my liver is doing. I have what's called stage 3 fibrosis of the liver. So my liver disease has regressed from acute terminal to later stage, but nonetheless very manageable. And that's where I continue to be. Is I still have my same old liver, still have my kidneys, my pancreas, everything. But I'm just in much better shape moving forward.
That's a powerful fucking story, man.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And they're, about, I think it was 6 or 7 years ago, they finally started to do a study. So there's a handful of us at Cedars who are being studied because we have progressed past end stage failure without transplant. And what they tell you in conventional medicine is that we're going to fill you with all these medications. These medications are the way. Listen to us. This is the only way forward. Logically speaking, you can understand that my pancreatitis, my kidneys almost failed, and my liver is failing. You keep pumping my body with all these pharmaceuticals, I'm going to continue to die. I'm going to continue to get worse. Conversely, if you fill me with beets, spinach, fiber, grilled chicken, and vegetables, that's all my body needed. That's literally all my body needed, and to move. So insert those variables and movement, and if you graphed it on a chart, it was a 45-degree angle. I got better so quickly that people couldn't believe it. People that went and saw me in the hospital, I drove down 3 months later to the South Bay, and I'll never forget my buddy Peter Lang. He saw me unloading my pickup truck, and he goes, Zach? He had just seen me 3 months prior in the hospital dying, and here I am able to drive, and I'm 3 hours from home with him unloading things from the truck. Yeah. And it was remarkable how quick the body can regenerate itself if you just give it some guidance and don't fall back on pharmaceutical protocols.
And put the right stuff in it, right?
Yeah.
So beets, spinach, vegetables, chicken breast.
I make a smoothie. I do a blender full every day. I have for almost 17 years. It's beets, spinach, ginger or turmeric, kefir, so like a yogurt base, usually a cucumber or something like that also for a base, sometimes water. Sometimes I'll put in some frozen fruit, but just those basics, not a lot of, because when you're in liver failure, you can't have salt. Salt will kill you. I mean, the amount of water weight my body was taking on is really detrimental. So you want to stay away from salt, stay away from sugars, and stay away, from anything processed. They don't tell you any of that. When you enter the liver transplant program, really the only thing they tell you is stop using drugs and alcohol and don't eat salt. Salt is the killer because your body is taking on so much liquid, so much water weight. And the reason you get ascites is because all this blood and bile is building up from liver hypertension. It's blocked. It can't process all these things that are coming up through your hepatic duct. So it empties into your abdominal cavity. So your abdominal cavity just fills with fluid. with bile and blood. And then you have to get that through paracentesis. They just stick a big ass gauge needle in your stomach or in your side, and they suck it out as much as they can. It's an awful, awful experience. So, all of that stuff started to go down. All of my yellow in my eyes and all of my skin started to regress. And it was really remarkable how quickly my body turned around just by eating whole fruits and vegetables and, grilled meats without anything processed or sugar.
Were you taking in like healthy fat too, or did you keep it pretty low fat?
The only reason I wasn't taking in healthy fat outside of avocado oils, things like that, was because they had told me to stay away from red meat. So it was hard for me to get, some of those fats when, and we had a slow cooker. So, and my dad still talks about it these days. He goes, those first 3 years you were in liver failure was the healthiest I've ever been, because I was cooking every night. And again, it was, if there's anything I could say to anybody out there who's struggling with liver failure or any of those issues related to liver failures, if you change what you put in your body, your life will radically change. Your body will heal itself, and you can come back from it. And I'm not telling people to outright stay away from medical advice or protocols or procedures, but certainly what did it for me was paying less attention to all of that advice and more attention to just controlling healthfully what went in my body.
I think that's sound advice for everybody, irrespective of liver failure or not. If you adhere to, primarily nutrient-dense, natural whole foods and don't put bullshit in your body, like it will improve your life drastically no matter what, From the day that you were diagnosed until you would characterize back to normal, what time frame span was that?
So I got diagnosed. The way I got diagnosed is pretty interesting. I knew for a long time I was sick. Something was wrong with me. My belly was filling up with liquid. I was having weird pains. You start to leak blood from both ends. So you start to cough up blood. Also, at least I did. I had preliminary, what they call esophageal varices. And so I finally got the courage to go to get my blood test done. And I went into the hospital to get the results. We had at the time this little hospital in Tehachapi. And the nurse brought me in. I knew her through her daughter. And she sat me down and she started petting my hand. She's like, honey, I have something to tell you. Okay. You're in liver failure and you need to go to a hospital immediately. Lady, I just tied one on last night. That's all it is. You don't understand. I'm fine. It's just because my brain, when you're addicted to alcohol the way I was, my entire life revolved around alcohol. It is impossible. It is a logical impossibility to imagine my life without alcohol. There will be no me. I do not exist without it, especially having tried to get off alcohol before. I tried to, go through withdrawals and get myself through it. And it wasn't even the physical pain as much as it was the emotional, spiritual terror that overwhelms you when you don't have what you need, especially when you're physically addicted, and she just told me, you're in liver failure, you need to go to a hospital. And I went home and I just lied about it.
Wow.
I just told everybody, I'm fine, just no more hard liquor. I just said, I just want us drinking, they want me drinking wine. Like I completely lied because I was so scared at the probability of proceeding. I mean, I remember it. I remember thinking my life is over. I can't continue unless I have this in my life, and so I lied about it for about another month. And then physically I couldn't hide it anymore. I was coughing. I'd have these coughing fits where blood would come up. And again, like from my rear end that were awful, and when you're leaking blood, it's really difficult. And I just looked.
Do you have pictures from then?
I'm sure we have some somewhere. I have some from the first day I was in the hospital. And then when I got moved from Tehachapi Hospital to Bakersfield Memorial Hospital.
If you're okay.
What I would do is I would wear long sleeve, everything, really baggy clothes so that you couldn't see the yellow or the bruises. And then I wore sunglasses and I would sit outside and I would tan because I was like a very pronounced yellow. And if you got suntanned, you would look more orange. You wouldn't look as yellow. So I could hide it, to just delay this inevitability. And then I got checked in for long-term care at Memorial, and then the process started. And
so that, if you count that day of when you went to the hospital, I guess, and actually started treating yourself, until you felt like you were as close to back to normal as possible? How long of a time
It was
span?
probably a year before I was fully back to normal. I think the ascites had subsided by about, because Thanksgiving that year, I still had a belly. So I would say probably like February.
Yeah.
I got out of the hospital in September 9th of 2008, something like that. And I think by about January or February of the next year,
Yeah.
my ascites had gone down. Most of the yellowing was gone. My numbers were still very elevated, so from a blood test perspective, I wasn't doing very well, but I was starting to feel great, and I was starting to work out. What I was able to start doing in February or around about that time was exercise, like actually exercise, because when your belly is filled with ascites, you can't move. Lateral Gs are terribly painful. So it's really difficult to do anything. You can't run. You can't do any of that stuff. You can walk, but lots of things are terribly painful. So, and that certainly accelerated my recovery. Once I was able to actually start to work out, and then from hiking, like be able to start running, it was to the moon. I was off and running.
And I assume you were staying at home with your dad.
Yeah.
Assuming you're not working.
No, I was not working. Everything started, when I got home from the hospital, I was so acutely ill. It was just they wanted to send me home on hospice from Bakersfield Memorial. Yeah. So they were trying to get me home on hospice care because the insurance would cost so much. I ended up getting a bill for $988,000 from the hospital, which we didn't end up having to pay in full. But about 2-3 months is when I started to really start to get better, and everything was dogs. So I took over the garage and built kennels in there and crates, and everything was bringing dogs in. And I started to recruit foster parents, and then the veterinary hospital gave me 2 kennels in the veterinary hospital to use for strays, and they started giving me a discount. And so all this stuff is happening, and I'm feeling purpose for the first time in my life. And I used to volunteer for the animal shelter for years before I got sick, only to show the rest of the world that I wasn't a piece of shit. Everybody else has good master's degrees, and they're doing these incredible things, and I'm going to
I'm walking dogs, motherfucker.
Yeah, and I'm saying, oh yeah, well, do you? But what do you do for the puppies? And where was I going with that? Long story short, like the most integral variable to my recovery, all the physical diet stuff that we're talking about, super important, but it was having purpose. It was being able to plug myself into something that gave me purpose, because with purpose came self-esteem. I had no self-esteem. I was my worst enemy every single day of my life. Forget my own worst critic. I was my worst fucking enemy, 1,000%, and a complete liability to myself, And when I found purpose, where all of my day was spent not obsessing about all of my bullshit, which is the record that was playing every single minute of every single day, how bad you suck, what a terrible failure you are. That was all the narrative that was being played in my head. And when I started to focus on these animals, there was so much to tend to. They needed so much from me. To fill a dog's, needs, to fulfill them is a tremendous experience. But like I explained before, I'm going through recovery, and what I needed in my recovery were rules, boundaries, discipline, exercise, affection, and love. And what these dogs need in recovery is rules, boundaries, discipline, exercise, affection, and love. So we're giving it to each other, and and all boats are rising as we set off on this trajectory. And I was able to get creative. I'm taking all the pictures for the dogs on our hikes. So for their advertising, because as you know, with used dog salesmanship, you have to really, it's all about marketing. You have to help these people fall in love with the dogs that you're falling in love with and rehabilitating. So I'd write their stories, and I'd go all over town and put their flyers up everywhere. And so my banks of flyers, and at the time I'm volunteering for other organizations. So I'm just helping them, bringing on all their foster dogs and doing things, and I would get to write stories about, how the dogs ended up at the shelter. So they all got pinched for different crimes, like streaking or pissing in public or disorderly conduct. So I'm just making up ludicrous stories, and people are getting a kick out of it. That was the first time I've been creative, other than like what other clothes I put on myself. I was never creative. And so I got this creative outlet. I have this altruism that I might not really recognize at the time, because I didn't feel like I was a special person for doing dog stuff. It felt right for me. I was emotionally and spiritually drawn to these creatures because they helped counteract the narrative that was constantly playing in my head, which is that I wasn't enough. And if I was going to believe that I wasn't enough, that's calling them liars across the board. That's telling me every emotion that these animals are feeling for me the energy that they're drawn to in me. I'm saying that that's bullshit if that's what I want to abide by. And that wasn't the case. Like, so I really rooted into the human animal bond, like that connection, what they were trying to tell me about me. And then I started to become a leader. I started to become a leader of dogs. There's no way I could have been a leader of men back then, right?
Yeah.
But it started as a leader of dogs. And when you can put one foot in front of another and you're leading those pack walks through the mountains, and we live in bear country and mountain lion country, and that's how it started. So I'm at the front of this pack, and we'd have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dogs with, and with all that practice and with all that action, started to come self-esteem and started to come some pride. You know, I don't think I'll ever be to the point where I think much of that much of myself, but I certainly think more of myself than I used to, you know, and it was because I was living to serve them instead of myself, you know.
Folks, just a quick heads up. I do have a Team Dog Patreon tier where I answer questions via video, either just describing the answer to the question or even demonstrating some of it. So go to our Mic Drop Patreon page, check out the Team Dog tier, and I look forward to seeing you in there. Thank you much. So what did you do after that then? I mean, did that turn into creating...
So volunteering and kind of giving my life over to the dogs just naturally as a mechanism to try to stay away from suicidal thoughts and to try to plug myself into any purpose, it just set into motion all of these things that I had almost no control over. My community, the pet lodge and the Tehachapi Veterinary Hospital said, look, dude, like we really need you. We think you should do this. And I'm like, do what? They're like, start a dog rescue. I'm like, you know, I'm just a drunk with a dream. That'll never work. Like the IRS will never approve me. I'll never get nonprofit status. Like I didn't know. I didn't know how these things worked.
Well, but was there ever a reality check come to Jesus with your dad of saying, okay, I'm glad you're better, but you're in my fucking garage. There's 50 dogs in it. Like you got to figure something else out here. Like, was there ever one of those?
God, it's so funny that you say that, man, because no, there wasn't.
As a dad, I can fucking imagine like
there wasn't, you know, he, I think, especially because my dad grew up without a father, I think bringing all those animals into our home on a regular basis, I think it revealed to him a part of himself that he didn't know. Like he became so much more loving and so much more connected. My dad was never a hugger, never any of those things. Yeah. He's like one of the most loving guys. He's still not the best hugger, but he's so connected to those dogs, and he's so determinedly in love with me as his son that he was so happy that I was not dying anymore. Yeah. He was so, and I think at the beginning he was really still scared that one little derivation this way or that way, I'm going to go off the deep end again, and he's going to be worried for my life. So I think, you know, and I'll never be able to thank him enough for this. I can't imagine what that man went through in terms of anxieties and pressures and stresses, and just the idea of losing your son, having to confront that every day, especially when he's right in front of you, and then being such a loose cannon that you never know what might send me right back into that. You know, so I think it was years before he felt really confident that I was okay, right? That I was going to be fine.
Did you have any sobrietal setbacks?
I did. Yeah. I had an intense sobrietal setback. Yeah, my dad.
If that's even a word, I don't know if that.
Yeah, no, I had a relapse almost exactly a month after I got out of the hospital. So I had been sober about a month, been going to meetings, and I went to meetings and just in the beginning, I just demanded to speak to the president. And they're like, we don't have because I'm like, look, I need a liver transplant. I'm here for your meeting or whatever, but I need a liver transplant, and I'm a priority. And they would just kind of pat me on the head and deal with me. I would also have these flare-ups of ammonia on where I wasn't making sense. And so they were very kind to me, and not a lot of people wanted to get close to me in the beginning because I was so sick. But, you know, I felt like I somewhat understood, and I felt like I was getting excited about sobriety, but I hadn't really engaged with it for anything more than a means to an end, which was a liver transplant. And my dad had to fly to Brazil, to Brasilia, the capital. He had work with the Brazilian Air Force, and this had to happen, and he had to leave me alone. And he took the keys, and he was going for 3 days. So as quickly as you can fly to the capital of Brazil and back. I think he only spent one night there. And he left. I don't even remember thinking I wanted to drink. And then I found the backup keys to the car, to the truck. and drove. I just remember thinking I wanted to taste alcohol. I wanted to taste some wine, and surely there's no way I would drink it because I'm acutely in liver failure, and there's no way I'll take this to excess. And I remember the first sip, and I don't remember anything after that. And I came to almost 3 days later when he was on his way home. He was 4 hours away from home. I had a couple double bottles of wine and a box that I don't know how I got. I obviously drove to the store. I don't know how they sold alcohol to me. I looked like I just got out of the hospital, you know? And yeah, I'll never forget it, man. My stomach, the liquid started to bleed into my stomach again, which is really painful. My eyes started to get really yellow. And so I walked over to my dad's office. I knew we had to go to the hospital. And I told him, and I said, hey, we got to go to the hospital. I drank again. And he kind of wasn't really double taked. And he looked up and he was, what do you mean? What are you talking about? I took off my glasses so he could see my eyes, and he could tell that, how yellow they were. And he just started shaking his head. And my dad doesn't get emotional. My dad is certainly not a crier. And he just kept repeating, you've killed yourself. You've killed yourself. You've killed yourself. I can't believe you did this. You've killed yourself. And he goes, oh, fuck you. I'm not taking you to the hospital.
Oh shit.
And I go, Dad, I'm really hurting. We need to go. And he ended up finally taking me, which was a very difficult ride to the hospital. And they did what they had to do for me down there and then sent me home. And that was the last time I had a drink.
Oh shit. So even now, I assume you don't casually drink or.
No.
Yeah, there's no.
No way. Yeah, no. I haven't had a drink since October 12th, 2008.
What about pain meds? Is that something that similarly you just have to steer fucking completely?
Oh yeah, I don't mess with any of that stuff. I never shot heroin, but I've done heroin. I got addicted to Dilaudid, in the hospital. Yeah. And I went through 2 days of acute withdrawals. I don't want anything to do with opiates in any way, shape, or form. I had complicated back surgery. I took Advil, man.
Oh.
Yeah, none of that.
Yeah. How soon after you were basically fully recovered? And I mean, is that right when you started Marley's Mutts? Mm-hmm. Was when they said, okay.
I was still in, I was still technically end stage when we started. I mean, I wasn't end stage. I'm not sure what the exact classification was, but I was still sick when we created Marley's Mutts. I just, you couldn't see it quite as much on me physically. Yeah. And again, once I started to be able to work out, my whole physical presentation changed. I gained 20 pounds of muscle and
turned into the accountant.
There you go, dude.
Affleck versus
bringing it back. That's what I'm talking about. We got to give a shout out to John Bernthal too.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of what movie Affleck is in where he looks like a bag of mashed assholes. I can't think of it. I'm sure there is.
Well,
one.
He's versatile.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm excited for Accountant too. I love
Dude,
John
it's great.
Bernthal,
Have you seen? You not seen it? It's awesome. I honestly, I mean, it's one of the few sequels that's absolutely as good as the first one, which is rare. I mean, Top Gun 2 is really the only other one I can think of recently. But all right, so did you basically just keep doing what you were doing? And now it's official, and it kind of slowly grew from there? Or did you make any super dynamic changes, 30,000 foot view wise?
Yeah, so I was so delighted. So the way it started was I created Marley's Mutts as a doing business as. I didn't think the IRS would approve me. So what I set out to do is I'm going to get 100 adoptions. I'm going to send them all the contracts and the flyers. They'll have no choice. Because I thought they're going to know I'm a drunk and a drug addict. There's no way they'll approve me. So my logic was I'll give them irrefutable proof that we're doing good shit and they got to approve us. And so I did that. So for the first year, we just operated as a DBA. Starting in 2010, May, we became a nonprofit. So we've been technically a nonprofit for the last 15 years. But yeah, I created it just to, the idea in the beginning was just to create a better foster structure to be able to save more lives, particularly big dogs. Nobody took on big dogs. There's all small dogs, and there was breed specific. Doberman, German Shepherd, but nothing for the Mutts, nothing for the dog that I grew up with. That I grew up rescuing dogs at the shelter with my mom and my dad, and so I wanted a rescue for the Mutts. And hence Marley's Mutts was born. I didn't even come up with the name. One of the gals from the pet lodge came up with the name. Oh, no because shit. Marley was with me all the time, and all we rescued was Mutts. Just call it Marley's Mutts. Like, that's brilliant. Yeah. I probably owe her money. Yeah. But yeah, and then when it became, I started speaking. I love this, by the way. I started speaking at high schools. I was the drug addict that came, and I really remember the people that used to come to school. I don't know why they resonated with me. Maybe it's because I knew I was going to become an alcoholic and a drug addict, which, by the way, I knew since I was 18.
Oh, right.
I knew I was a drug addict and an alcoholic from that point on. I had no delusions. It was very obvious to me. But I started, speaking to huge crowds, and then I started speaking in recovery rooms and started hitting that circuit, and I couldn't believe how much like things resonated, with people, and how many fosters we were able to recruit. Like we got dozens of foster homes and then dozens more, like very quickly. There was something about the way I was talking and how I was communicating and how we were doing things that people really resonated with. And so after Marley's Mutts had been established for a year or so, we started to really do what I endeavored to accomplish, which was holistically address the animal sheltering problem. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of rescues, and really all we're doing is one dog at a time. You're saving one dog at a time, putting them in a foster home, whatever. Rescue by relocation, moving them to here, whatever. That's great. But what we really need to do is identify all the variables that have created this problem and address each of those variables so that we can come up with a solution.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I have both polarizing and kind of outside the norm viewpoints on that I'll share with you, but I want to get your take first.
Yeah. So when it comes to, rescue, when it comes to the socio-cultural realities of why we have an overpopulation problem, why we're having to euthanize 1 million plus animals a year and all that, the issues are spay and neuter, comprehensive spay and neuter, education, social and cultural education, right? Rescue by relocation. So in other words, moving dogs from areas of high concentration euthanasia to areas of low concentration euthanasia, and training, almost all the dogs. Our county shelter right now is 100 dogs on the euthanasia list, 100 dogs. There's like a 250 dog setup that has 450 dogs in it. Almost all of those dogs are young, large dogs, shepherds, pitties, huskies. Only way to address their needs is through training. The only way to get society and our culture to come along for the ride and understand is to educate them. The only way to deal with the exponential nature of procreation in the pet world is by comprehensive, targeted, zip code spay and neuter. So I started to create those departments, created a really robust spay and neuter department that after 7 years was the only time our county ever became no-kill, which is less than 10% euthanasia. It's the only time, because every dollar that the county put in, our organization matched it. So we were doing comprehensive spay and neuter on the streets, canvassing, speaking to people with interpreters, or for those of us that speak Spanish, and really hitting the communities. We established Miracle Mutts with Liz Cover in 2012, which is almost every day of the week doing education in schools, institutions. We bring our therapy dog teams, and we share about the human-animal bond and what the variables are that will help us get to less euthanasia. So that was what I really founded Marley's Mutts on, was holistically addressing this issue. I want us to put ourselves out of a job, and that's what we really need to be striving for. Whereas the conventional wisdom is just kind of, we're going to rescue one dog at a time, tell the stories, which is all great, but we want to get to a point where this no longer exists.
Yeah. Again, I appreciate you bringing it up, and similarly, like one of the kind of, I would say, primary tenets of why I started the online training was for that. Obviously, my dog industry experience was on the military and military working dog / police service dog side. But similarly, when I started looking at statistics on, an average of 2,100 dogs a day being euthanized in the United States, I was like, holy fuck. That's an absurd number. And I agree. I think education is, just like in most aspects of life, the backbone of fixing problems is understanding what the problem is, and then, educating whoever needs to be educated to be able to fix it. But there is another side to it that I see, and I'm going to preface this with, they are very hardline approaches. Some would even argue that they're not realistic, which I don't even necessarily disagree with. And they are very kind of general principles. How you would actually apply them is where it's the most difficult to be able to say, yeah, that makes sense, or no, that's just not realistic. So I just want to preface it with that, because I know I'm going to get a bunch of comments from people about, spaying and neutering or having a certain evaluation test. But when I take a step back and I look at it as a problem that's isolated, in terms of thinking of it like any other problem, where it's like, okay, what is the biggest issue? Well, the biggest issue is this overabundance of dogs. And when I look at, say Bob Barker's, always saying spay and neuter your dogs, and looking at all these different programs, making it mandatory that dogs are spayed and neutered before they're adopted, the amount of money that, whether it's HSUS, PETA, ASPCA, whoever, has taken in over the last, we'll say 30 years. It's a staggering amount of money has been, and resources, manpower, facilities, et cetera, have been put into fixing this problem. And I agree. I think that, putting yourself out of a job, I love that you said that. I don't know that a lot of people in shelter environments or who are in charge of shelter environments and taking in large amounts of donations every year necessarily share that viewpoint. They may say that they do. I don't know that they do. And the reason that I say that is that if you look at, putting money, resources, and education into this problem, I would ask, how does that look compared to, say, 30 years ago in terms of the amount of dogs who are in shelters that need to be adopted and or are on kill lists? And so, to me, just like if you look at drugs, importation of guns, child trafficking, terrorism networks, like in any problem that's similar in scale, where it's fucking enormous, you have to look at other factors. And to me, the biggest factor that I don't normally hear people talk about is the supply and demand aspect of it, and specifically on the demand side, where there's such a lack of understanding and intelligence from a genetic and behavioral standpoint in terms of evaluating dogs, that's where I think the biggest problem lies. And the reason I say that is that, going back to your point on the training, is that I would agree 1,000% that if you look at your average shelter dog, yes, they're big, they've got a bunch of behavioral issues. One of the biggest scapegoats I see is that the dog was abused, or it was used as a fucking bait dog, or like all these things that there's no way to prove that, but that gets, explained as this is why this dog is X. When the reality of it is, the breeding practices, from my perspective, are by far the biggest problem. Is you have people who don't know what a good dog is, don't know what a breed standard is, and I'm not talking about an AKC or UKC conformation standard. I'm talking about a working and temperament standard. Is that if you have people who don't know how to breed good dogs, breeding a bunch of really, really substandard, below par genetic specimens, there's only so much training you can do. And the reason, why my opinion maybe is different than most is that when you're breeding very, very specifically for a working purpose, and it doesn't have to be relegated to police or military work, it could be hunting, it can be, fucking anything, it could be agility for that matter, but is that you have to be very, very strategic and particular and specific in the examples that you're breeding. Even when you're doing that, it's difficult to get to that level. And even if I go to, say, Netherlands and try to select, 3 dogs out of 50, in a 2-week period on a buy trip, I'm washing out a bunch of these dogs who have been bred, raised, and trained from really, really good genetic stock. So my point in bringing all that up is that when you have a society who has this overabundance of Craigslist dogs and backyard breeders who are breeding dogs who genetically have a very, very low cap, right? Is that because if I'm looking for, let's say, a high-end military working dog, my evaluation is going to be purely genetic, right? I don't care how much training the dog has or doesn't have, because I'm always capped with the genetics. If I'm going to get the dog to this really, really elite level of training, if he doesn't have the genetics to allow that, it doesn't matter how good of a trainer I am.
He's not built for the NBA.
Right. And so to me, I like to use the analogy of an amp, right? Amp and speakers is that, if you have a 10-watt amp, right, and you have, 4 4x12 cabinets that you're trying to drive that amp with, doesn't matter, how much power, you have 10 watts to deal with. If you have a 250-watt amp, then you can use that 250 watts. And while that's an extreme example, to me, this is no different in that if specifically the nerves, the environmental nerve and the confidence temperament. If those things aren't genetically sound, there's only so much training you can do with a nervy, anxious, kind of freak of nature dog that is scared of their own shadow. And yes, you can dedicate your entire life to trying to fix and rehabilitate those dogs, but again, you're always capped with that genetic component. And so, my tail on the kite comes back to, if the public is educated in how to select dogs, is that you're going to have a very rough period of a generation or two of dogs that basically get hung out to dry.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah.
Because if everybody understood, okay, if I'm going to look for a prospective puppy for my family or a rescue or whatever, and I say, hey, I'm going to evaluate this dog the way I would evaluate a police dog, because temperamentally they need to be that sound if they're going to make a good pet that isn't a total nightmare to deal with, where you have to be a world-class trainer to raise them. So I take that puppy, and instead of it's with its litter mates where it feels strong and confident and comfortable and can draw power off of that, it's at its home environment, same exact factors. It's around its parents. Now a third factor that's basically manufacturing and hiding a lot of the things that this dog actually has that you're not going to see. So now if I take that puppy, I remove him from his litter, I remove him from his home, I remove him from his parents, I take him to Home Depot where he's never been, and now I see what's really there.
Sure.
And I say, dude, this dog is a fucking nerve bag. I'm not taking him. So again, you're going to have this period where if we had a magic wand to be able to educate the entire public to a degree with which they could go and evaluate dogs that way, that's what's necessary.
Yeah.
But to me, like, if you don't do that, you have this hamster wheel that we're going to continue to deal with over and over and over, where we have people such as yourself and so many other great individuals that work their ass off to fix dogs that, can only be fixed so much. And so to me, that's the demand component because the reality of, just like with drugs or again, human trafficking, whatever, if nobody did drugs anymore, the cartels aren't going to be selling drugs. They're not going to be making them. They're not going to be, funneling them in here. Same thing is that if everybody all of a sudden raises their standards to, hey, I'm only going to take a dog that's going to be an easy, super trainable, fucking cognitively driven dog. I'm not saying that that's easy. And again, I get that these are oversimplifications for the sake of brevity, is that we don't have 2 weeks to talk about it. But to me, like that's an angle that you never really hear about.
I'm glad you brought that up. That is definitely a viable angle. And we're all the variables were the frequency of this environment less frenetic. Yeah. That would be possible, and that would be advisable, and that could be implementable as an operation. But the frequency, I mean, dogs they're not coming out at a trickle. They're coming out at like a fire hose, and the frenetic pace at which rescuers and shelter workers are trying to keep up is obnoxious. Like, it is just, you could never, unless it's a shelter somewhere that's not dealing with a lot of flow, which you definitely could. And those should be operational procedures. That should be how you pair someone up. It should just be like pairing up an adoptive child to a certain degree. You got to make sure there are compatibilities. You can meet their needs. You've got to make sure you can meet their needs. But the reality of it is Texas and California are 1 and 2 every year for shelter euthanasia. And they are that way because the vast majority of people are still getting dogs from unwanted litters. The majority of dogs still come into people's homes from unwanted litters and neighbors, friends, family. That's how dogs are coming to them. So these aren't planned. Which is why I always come back to spay and neuter, because spay and neuter, I agree with you, through any of the large organizations has been happening for decades. But the peak was the 70s and 80s. You should have seen the shelter euthanasia statistics from the 70s. They are wild. They're triple what they are now, which is unbelievable to think about. But all of those, many of those organizations, it's not comprehensive and it's not cohesive. So these spay and neuter efforts are happening per organization in some kind of a way that's effective, but isn't as effective as it could be. The way we do spay and neuter in our community, and what led us to below 10% euthanasia or no kill, is targeted spay and neuter. So we did data-driven reports from every zip code to tell us where the strays are coming in, where the intakes, where the owner surrenders are coming from. We're going to target those environments, those communities, through community-based programming, door knocking, canvassing, radio, all of these different things. Your boy getting on Mexican radio going, "Me llamo Zach de los Marleys Mutts," And that's how we were able to do it, because all of those unwanted litters, people had a resource. And people, for those who say, I don't understand why it's such a big deal to get your animal spayed or neutered, you've never been poor. If you can't understand why dropping $300 on spaying or neutering your animal isn't attainable for these people, you've never been poor.
Yeah. Well, and again, my outside, or not even outside looking in, but just the different perspective I have on it. Again, I get that this is more like from such a principled, and people may even say or argue that it's a naive standpoint. But to me, I look at it, again, from that different angle of spaying and neutering. The issue I have with it is just like with people, is the removal of hormones, and having an imbalance,
Sure.
I think is a horrible idea, especially before their entire skeletal structure is finished growing, and I think that's half of why there are so many problems with joints and even from a behavioral standpoint. If you have a 5-year-old son and you cut his nuts off, is he going to grow into a grown man?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I think the landscape and the culture, the realities of what we're facing now are so dire and are so drastic that you have to do a give and take there. And,
no, I agree. And again, I'll reiterate that I get that these are like principles that most people, and even I'm not disputing that they're probably not realistic. I just look at it like, if you can't afford to spay and neuter your dog, or the other side of that coin is, I would say, if you're not responsible enough to keep your animals from fucking, you probably shouldn't have one. Yeah. Like, that's just how I view it.
I think that's how most people would view it. It's just not.
It's not the reality. No, I know it.
And I agree with you big time, especially when it comes to hormones, and when a dog requires drive to be successful and even to meet its own needs. Neutering an animal that requires drive to exist and to perform is nonsensical.
Yeah, well, I would take it like, if we remove the working aspect, even from the pet aspect. Even though, yes, I work in the working dog industry, that's very, very specific, and they're not very pet-like in some ways. My online training for the last 8 years is primarily pet dogs, and I've worked with tens of thousands of them. But to me, one of the biggest issues I see behaviorally with rescues and pet dogs is spaying or neutering prior to mental maturity, is that without that hormone balance until they get to a level of mental maturity, you're essentially hitting the pause button on their ability to do that. And so I'm not that surprised when I see a 5-year-old dog that acts like a 6-month-old, because he never hormonally grew up to a point of being mentally mature. And so to me, like, if you're hell-bent on spaying and neutering, fine. At least wait until the dog is 2, a year and a half, at least to a point where they're out of the puppy stage and you're not removing their ability to fully mentally mature that way. But
that's understandable. And I think you probably have different standards or approaches for different industries, because with your industry and even with the purebred dog industry, you're dealing with different parameters. Whereas in the rescue space, you're dealing with this,
No, and I mean, to be fair, I don't disagree with or discount the fact that, hey, the problem is what it is. And again, like, I'm also not naive to the fact that my perspectives on it are very pie in the sky and very unrealistic.
Yeah.
They're almost theological from the standpoint of, if I had this magic wand to say this is how you fix the problem, I do think that that's the best way to fix it. I don't think it's realistic or very applicable in doing so.
It will be, hopefully, one day.
I hope so.
Yeah. And what drives me nuts we talked earlier about identifying the variables that created and kind of caused this issue. And what drives me nuts is this cultural drive to simplify things. They want things to be so simple that they don't have to think hard about it, which mainly focuses on the shelter. We're going to attack the shelter. After all, is where the dogs are being euthanized. So we're going to attack the shelter because this week 56 dogs were put to death at the shelter. Not realizing or understanding that everybody who works at a shelter does so because they love animals. If you're going to go pursue a career at an animal shelter, I've worked at animal shelters for years and years and years and years. It is a wild, deafening, sensory overload, hyper emotional place that is so difficult to face on a daily basis. Not only are you surrounded by suffering and animals who are barking, who are smelling, who can't touch or feel any of what they can hear or smell. Their primary instinct is constantly giving them this information that they can't really do anything with. They're having to get to know these animals, advocate for these animals, love these animals, create a connection. And then at the end of however many weeks, with a couple of their friends that they work with, hold this animal down, inject it with a sedative, inject it with euthanol, and then have to guide it out into, into death. And so many within this space would look at those individuals as the bad people, because after all, they're the ones that took the life, as opposed to looking at the sociocultural reasons that we have these problems. And it is so frustrating to me, because there are a lot of really good, really hardworking, really empathetic, traumatized people that work within shelters that are bearing the brunt of this. And we're also trying to solve a difficult problem. And if we keep pushing people away, we're never going to attract the best and brightest to help us solve these problems. And that's what's happening is everybody who comes on as a shelter director or something is getting absolutely blitzkrieged from every angle, to the point where it makes it too difficult to survive, And there's one other thing I wanted to mention that is another real reality that we see with purebred dogs in our community is these are just opportunists. So when oh man, what's the HBO show with all the huskies?
Shit, I don't know.
Oh man, help us out, Zach. It was on HBO. It's the like future primitive Viking type where they had a bunch of huskies. Oh man,
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
Oh,
Thank you, dude.
Yeah.
So when Game of Thrones was out, and certainly right as it ended,
The direwolf.
the influx of huskies that we got in Kern County, which again, we're in the Central Valley, it's above 100 degrees for 5 months out of the year, was astonishing.
Yeah, crazy.
It was astonishing. I mean, if you graphed it on a chart, the perturbation was like radical, the number of huskies that we started to take in. So a lot of these breeding situations, aren't legal. They're blatantly illegal. But law enforcement focuses on human crime. They're focusing on murders and gangs and drive-bys and drugs, etc. Animal crimes technically are the focal point of animal control officers and animal control entities. There aren't anywhere near enough, when it comes to an enforcement, from an enforcement standpoint, there aren't anywhere near enough enforcement of those laws. Most of the laws exist on the books. You're supposed to have a breeding license in Kern County and Los Angeles County, all these different things. You're supposed to have X, Y, and Z. Almost none of them do, and there is no way to enforce it. There's a handful of animal control officers that control all of Kern County, which is hundreds of square miles, and they're doing house calls, they're doing stray pickups, they're cleaning up dead animals. There is no chance in hell they have enough time to investigate abuse cases, breeding cases, not even close. And, recently we've been, supporting various different acts at the federal level, which are trying to create federal task forces that can get behind enforcing some of the laws, because they just don't exist. The animal community is saying, guys, we need the laws. By now, we basically have the laws. We don't have the enforcement.
Yeah, I agree. And my take on attacking it from the other side is not saying it's either or. Like, by all means, I don't think getting rid of those organizations should be on the table. But looking at it again, if you view it kind of like drugs, because I think there's some parallels, is that if there is a way to try to attack it from the angle of lessen the demand by raising the standard with which, instead of just being like, well, fuck, I'm broke, so I'll take this $20 backyard bred dog who's a total nerve bag that is going to be a fucking nightmare and wind up in a shelter in 8 months. Instead of saying like, no, let me, get a good selection that's going to be easy to train and capable of training. It's going to settle into being a house pet and not having a husky in Kern County.
That would be the beautiful ideal.
Yeah, I think it's doing both.
There's a real sloppiness when it comes to pet parenthood and a commitment to a life that you've made, like a profound sloppiness. I'll never forget, I had one of the biggest reality checks of what this industry is all about in like the first year of rescue. This is 2009. And California City which is a very poor city, had raised enough money to get a working dog for their department. And I'd heard about this through the grapevine, and cool. Very small department as well. And I was at their animal shelter, which is a complete shithole at the time. Holes in the roof, exorbitantly hot, 115 degrees hot, and almost no way to take care of the animals. They didn't even vaccinate their shelter animals. And one day in there, I'm looking at, I see a Malinois with clearly a lot of drive looking right back at me. Holy shit, whose dog is this? And the lady goes, for that canine that they brought on a few weeks back. Well, he was up in an attic, his first real pursuit of this sort, and he bit the handler in the attic. It was dark. They got confused. What do you mean? What is he, like, here on quarantine? So yeah, technically quarantine, but they may not come back to get him. Like, wait, they just paid 20, 25 grand for this dog, and they're just going to take it to the shelter because it bit someone? There's no other options for this dog?
That's where we step in. But
exactly. Yeah. And that dog got euthanized.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And I got a leash on this. Watching this dog in a kennel environment where there's that many dogs around it that are barking, poor dog, man. I mean, he was so stimulated, just so stimulated, and could barely get a leash on him, and he had no choice. Nobody came to advocate for him, and they just slid it under the rug, and he disappeared.
Crazy, man. Yeah, I mean, we have 30 kennel spaces. They're always full, and we have, usually around a dozen on a wait list. But I mean, that's 100% why we exist.
I think times have really changed, though, man. Like, I'm super proud of Kern County, Bakersfield, for what they've done with their working dogs. We helped them get some ballistic vests, some stab vests for their dogs. We did some fundraisers for them. That's cool. Watching what those dudes do with the community to bring the community into their relationship and to really learn the dynamic of their relationship, what they're capable of, the dog is a tool, as well as seeing an unconventional relationship. Because the way you guys bond with your dog is different. Yeah. It is different. It is a working relationship. And it's a fascinating, highly more dynamic relationship that requires more consideration and more vacillation of energy. Like, one of the things I noticed immediately about you is I'm not surprised that your dogs bond with you well, because your calm assertiveness is, like, blatantly obvious. The tone of your voice, the way you talk, your cadence. You have a confidence that isn't intimidating, and you have an energy that is welcoming but firm.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I will say, I mean, it's neat, not surprising, but neat that you notice or recognize, and that one of my biggest struggles early on in my working career was, not trying to be intimidating, but ending up, when you have a dog that's been bred, raised, and trained to truly be the apex in the room, it's very easy to pick a fight with a dog like that, unless you are very, very intentional about not being too much of that, like, bowed-chested, I'm the cock of the walk kind of thing, or whatever. And so, like, that was something I learned the hard way of, getting bit a bunch of times and being, trying to be a presence, because it's such a double-edged sword of being enough to be able to get in a dog's head. Like, if you're the decoy in the bite suit and the adversary, like, for the sake of the dog being effective on the street, is he's got to be tough. You've got to be able to condition and kind of linearly train him and build his confidence and build his kind of street wins, if you will, or battle wins. But that's a very, very fine line to walk, is that I've got to be able to be intimidating enough when I want to be, so that he understands, hey, this is real and I'm here to fucking snatch your soul. Yeah. But I can't be that right out of the gate. And I need to be able to turn that on like a light switch, but I've got to be able to turn it off also, just like that.
It happened to me so many times, getting redirected on with dogs who were not ready to be not ready to be connected with in that way.
Yeah.
So many times.
I know it.
I remember one time. Go ahead.
Obviously, Marley's Mutts had a profound impact and really set the stage, I assume, for the Positive Change program. How did that come about, and what was it born out of?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting genesis how Positive Change came about. Because the reason I created it in the beginning was because we needed more foster homes.
Oh, wow.
And like we talked about, young dogs on the euthanasia list, young, large dogs, unless you have a really competent, capable foster home, you can't meet their needs. Enrichment is very difficult. So the idea was, I just had a buddy, Robbie, who got out of prison after 13 years. And I set him up with a dog that I was fostering, who ended up having been shot. We pulled a 40 caliber bullet out of her lung, had to remove 2 of the lobes of her lung. He still has it. Her name's Shadow. And what Robbie did was get involved in the pet space. After he adopted that dog, I mean, he was feral when he came up. Low Dodger hat, covered in prison tattoos, not a lot of eye contact. And after connecting him with that dog, and he just crazily bonded with that dog. And it helped him get out into social situations. Always had a common denominator to talk about when being in situations. He started to share his testimony. He went to the mission at Kern County where my mom was getting sober at the time and shared his testimony, started sharing it meeting. He was just really doing a good job. And I watched this dude's trajectory just go from a recidivism statistic. He was going to go back to prison. Like this dude was not ready for, and he just became such a wonderful young man. And he became such an example, such a demonstration of what's possible when you, and that dog gave him so much social courage. Situations that he otherwise felt very uncomfortable with, he could face with Shadow with him. He became our ranch manager. Then he started a rescue called Strength of Shadow based off. So watching his trajectory, I'm like, so it's two things. What might happen if we connect dogs in prison? But more importantly, we need foster homes. And in prison, we can control all the variables. So we can control the structure, the enrichment. We get them working on crate training, all the things that they need to get adopted and stay adopted. Used dog salesmanship is about giving the dogs what they, trying to repair them to the best degree that's possible, and really highlighting their strengths, right? So that was really the goal. And we got shut down from institution after institution. Started with jails because I wasn't sure how to work it. Way too transient of a population. They're not in the pods long enough. They're going back and forth to court. So jail didn't work. We knew we needed a prison. And other dogs programs existed. But a lot of them were service dog programs, which are sending in they're doing puppy raising for 18 months. It's a whole different deal. Puppy raising is, you're just trying to kind of get out, look for dogs to get pulled for some, whether they're prey driven or they bark or they nibble or things like that. So we finally found a warden to take a chance on us. And and some of our defeats were awful. Like Tehachapi State Prison, the first time I went in there and talked to the warden, not only did she act like she didn't know the meeting was happening, it was a really, it was a very unfortunate. We did not feel welcome whatsoever. This was 2014. And then 2015, California City Correctional Institution, Warden David Long said, we want you in. And we were paying for it too back then. There was no support. We were paying for this on our own. So they brought us in, quickly structured the program, 8 dogs, 24 guys the first round. So 3 students per dog. Guys are working, going to school, different things. So they're having to share the responsibility. The prison system in California is very rigidly segregated racially and gang-wise. So
not intentionally, right?
Not by the institution,
system, right?
But by the inmates yeah. For sure. The whole California prison in particular, since the 80s, has been structured that way, where you have, whites, blacks, northerners, southerners, and then others. So anything other than black, white, Hispanic. So Pacific Islander, Native American. And there are rules about getting on with one another, eating together, working out together, drugs, etc.
Were you having to make those accommodations? Like if you had a dog with 3 people, it was all 3 white guys or all 3?
We took a really big chance, because when we first started, not only were the correctional officers very leery of us, to where I had to do presentations in front of the whole watch, where I had to stand in front of the whole watch, allow them to ask any question, no matter how dumb I thought it might be. Mainly they were focused on, these guys are going to train the dogs to attack us. You watch, it's going to happen. That's what they were focused on, is they're going to smuggle drugs and they're going to train the dogs to attack us. So we really had to explain what the process was, that not a lot of dogs were capable of that. It takes a certain amount of drive, blah, blah, blah. But we did get enough buy-in to get started, and Warden Long would not he supported us. That's what is so important when it comes to prison programming and operating in that kind of a space, is that you have support from the administrative staff, that you feel supported, because it's really hard. It's really difficult to carve out the operational procedures, the schedules, to get everything to fit. So we weren't sure, because originally we had Hispanics not bought in. They had boycotted the program. We had other different races who would boycott at different times. But then once we really proved ourselves, not only did we have no boycotts, but we were able to mix and match guys outside of their race on teams. And to have guys working for the first time in their entire incarceration, and most of our guys are long-term incarcerated. So most of our students have been incarcerated for decades for loss of life crimes, various types of loss of life crimes, most of them gang-related, most of them including a lot of enhancements for gang affiliation or weapons and things like that. And watching them work outside of their race for their first time and to bond with their brothers on the team and to really create a fellowship was remarkable.
Wow.
And these are guys that still communicate still. Some of them work for each other, with each other. These are guys that are out of prison now that are professional dog trainers.
That is so cool, man.
So yeah, it was that initial spot was California City. We did that for a year. We had the best trainers that you can think of. Lisa Porter, Leah Marquez. I mean, really powerful women, really calm, assertive, capable, knowledgeable women that, like you said, can do that dance, that can walk that fine line of being able to be affectionate or attractive with their energy, but also assertive when they need it to be able to facilitate connection, but also overrule when necessary.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, really smart, instinctual trainers, really, really women who too are willing to go into a maximum security prison, work with all men for hours on end.
Dicey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, by the end of the first round, at California City, it's built as a maximum security prison. It's a level 2, but most of the guys in there have worked their points down. So they're in for very violent crimes. And the guys would walk us out past the first checkpoint, which many of them were able to get past for work and other things, all the way to the second checkpoint. So, our squad, our team, our fellowship, we quickly became a cohesive unit, but they also very kind of adorably really valued our female trainers and wanted them to feel protected and supported at all times, including as they walked out, which is pretty cool.
Was it almost like a movie scene with like other inmates shouting and whistling and shit like that? Like, were they having to put up with that kind of stuff?
Oh, it can be. The tier is not. It's not a multiple tier like that. The tier in the pod is 2 stories, but it's not like a huge tier like you'd see at Folsom or San Quentin, old San Quentin. But yeah, I mean, some people, entering into a prison is a tricky. Yeah. When I first went in, I'm like, man, do I make eye contact? Do I acknowledge? Do I shake hands? And how do I operate? What do I do? And what I quickly learned is that, well, first of all, it's very difficult. You have to have the confidence to be able to make eye contact, and you have to have the respect innate inside of you to be understood. And if you really project respect and acknowledgement when you go in there, then you will 1,000% be received well, and they will be receptive to what you're trying to communicate. And for me, it's been really beautiful too, because I can be as loving as I need to be in there. That is an incubator of dark energy. Prison is a incubator of the darkest possible energy you can imagine. If people just got to step foot in a prison and understand what you're dealing with energetically, all constantly, it never lets up. When you as a canine handler understand energy, to be surrounded by threats all day long, it never stops, it never lets up. That is a really tough environment to be in. And if you can bring in some humanity, and if you can bring in some connection and some love and some empathy and some respect, and you can convey that to people to help remind them that they have humanity, that you see their humanity and that you recognize their humanity, it is a really beautiful thing. And at that moment is where progress happens. And so I started going in and I make eye contact with as many guys as I possibly can. I shake as many hands as I can. And if I know you and you're in my program, or I see you on the yard a lot, I'm hugging you. I'm dabbing you up. And that used to be called familiar contact. You're not supposed to connect with. And I think what a lot of the wardens and supervisory staff that really support me saw is, this guy is like their brother. And we need to allow him to be emotional with these guys. We need to allow him to be affectionate and to believe in these guys, because that's what I'm there to do. I'm there to believe in them. I want you to know that I support you and I believe in you as a brother, as a father even. A lot of them call me big bro. And that is so that you will uplift yourself, so that you will have the confidence and the self-esteem to pursue this trajectory of improvement. Because so many of those guys in there deal with what I dealt with, which is just a non-existent self-love, a self-love that is so elusive that it's almost impossible to pin down. And if you can start giving those guys love and respect, they start to feel it, and they feel it quickly. And you really see their demeanor change, and they become much more receptive to what you're trying to communicate and what you're trying to do. And I'm so grateful so many of the staff have kind of let me be in there. That's another thing that Scott Budnick taught me, was how to be yourself in prison, how to just go ahead and be loving, be that supportive, be that big bro.
Yeah. Man, that's super cool. I'm curious, logistically, how does that work, having dogs in there and multiple guys taking care of it?
Very challenging, because we also, so after the first year at California City, we quickly expanded to Wasco State Prison, North Kern State Prison, and Old Corcoran, level 4, 180, the gnarliest prison in California. which is probably means the gnarliest prison, maybe next to Angola in Louisiana, but a really gnarly place. And we're at an administrative segregation kickout yard. So these are guys that have been in the hole for years, right? And then they're coming onto that yard after being in the shoe. So they're in the security housing unit, the hole, then they're coming onto this yard immediately. So a lot of violence, a lot of beefs to pick, a lot of debts, a lot of all kinds of things happening. And so operating in those situations is very different because there's codes happening all the time. There's fights, there's stabbings, there's helicopters landing, there's all kinds of things. Like the central aspect of a yard where we work our Tehachapi State Prison program is a helicopter landing pad.
Oh, wow.
That is the central feature. It looks like it should be a statue, like the base of a statue, but there's just no statue there. It's a helicopter landing pad. It's right next to the associate warden's office. It's the first thing you see when you walk on the yard is an evacuation point for stabbings, you know? So we quickly expanded to those prisons and we had to learn how to operate in such a confined space. And one of the things about not confined space, but confined time schedule, you know, because you have to fit in with the prison's time schedule. So building the operational procedure and the schedule is really important. And really our dog programmers, they have different rules. They have to have freedom of movement, even if there's a lockdown. Even if they go on a first degree or second degree lockdown, our guys still have to be able to open the kennels, take the dogs out to evacuate, enrich the dogs. Like it's built into the OP. So if guys within the program are to have that kind of freedom, they've got to earn it. So the parameters to enter the program are no 115s, no violations for a year, which usually means you're clean or at least working on being clean or sober because drugs are ubiquitous in prison. They are everywhere. It means that you can have any animal abuse, you know, as part of your case. We have a couple other parameters, but for the most part, you have to write an essay. You have to be interviewed. We have to be able to make sure that you mean business. And then 3 guys per dog. We typically have between 6 and 10 dogs, so up to 30 guys. We hold class once a week for 3 hours. So 2 trainers and usually myself will go into class. We're working various types of curriculum over the years, which has been adjusted. We have a couple different types of program. We used to work towards the Canine Good Citizen certification. So the dogs were leaving with therapy certification, but we realized that's so specialized and it's so difficult that we really didn't need that much. What we needed was skills to get adopted and stay adopted. Operating, we really had to get buy-in from the institutions, and the institutions wouldn't have gone along with us had it not proven effective. And what I mean by proven effective is violence levels dropped precipitously, especially at Corcoran, and on an ad-seg kickout yard, there are fights, there's things happening or murmurs of fights constantly. And so to have that let up a little bit and have it be a place of actual programming and progress. The other thing is not a lot of programs go into level 4 prisons, almost none. So we're very unique in that we're seeking out high security prisons to carry out our program because it makes it safer for everybody. The communication between staff and student inmates is critical. As we shift towards the California model, in California in particular, which is a hybrid Norwegian kind of a model, that's one of the things they're focusing on is we need to allow for communication because this definitive us versus them. This is as polarizing as it is in the military, enemy versus American serviceman or woman. It is that polarizing. It is us versus them going to work, CO versus inmate. And if you keep that, it's not a tenable frequency to operate in. You know, it really encourages perturbations of violence on both sides. So if you have them communicating over something that's not going to get either of them in trouble, you know, related to the dog program and also a common denominator that everyone can relate to. So you're having casual conversations about the dogs. Most of the COs are the ones adopting the dogs in the early days. So you have this togetherness. They might not be on the same team, but they're at least getting along over a common principle that, again, is lifting all boats and helping everyone move forward in a safer, more productive environment. Because, you know, I give a lot of credit to correctional officers, man. Those guys go to work in a very difficult environment. Prison is thick. The air is thick when you walk in there. You feel it to a degree. You feel it in every part of your body, you know, and your parasympathetic nervous system kicks on as soon as you go in there, you know. And for those guys to have to suit up, they're putting on essentially police gear, and having to do that every day is not just taxing. It is I would imagine, you know, soul sucking to a degree. That is a really difficult frequency to maintain. So what I really love about our program is that it's created relationships there. And now, you know, some of our captains, they always speak at our graduations. They're shaking hands with our guys. That never happened.
Oh,
Some of them are contacting our guys. Big shout out to Warden RC. RC was our captain. Several guys from that program who were incarcerated for decades are professional dog trainers. And RC reached out to me and he said, hey man, give me Melvin's number. I want to talk to Melvin.
yeah.
So to have a warden call a guy who was formerly life without parole, having him connect with him on the phone, tell him he's proud of him, and hey, let me know if there's anything I can do for you. That's a big step, man. So we're kind of moving the culture to understand that the best thing we can do in a prison environment is provide enrichment, spiritual enrichment, moral enrichment, and really to believe in these guys. They just, second chances are a beautiful thing. They're a spiritual thing. It's what Jesus was. It's why Jesus is who he is. I often use Jesus as an example because I believe our American culture has forgot what it means to be graceful and to forgive. And I don't understand it. It feels so good to believe in someone who is desperate to be believed in, who is pursuing that second chance with every bit of their fiber. And that's what I get to see every day. On the one hand, I hear our culture saying, keep these fucking murderers behind bars forever. Are you kidding me? And then what I see is real human beings who committed crimes when they were 18, 19, 20 years old as part of a gang, who have been desperately working towards bettering themselves for decades. Every single day they're of service to their fellow brothers. Every single day they're writing, they're learning, they're unpacking their traumas to a degree nobody out here does. Nobody out here is unpacking their traumas, having inventories that are fucking 20 pages long for everything they've done wrong in this world. Writing the graffiti that we have in the pod at Tehachapi State Prison is all I'm sorry's, is will you forgive me for, I am sorry for, I love, So I get to see these real sons, daughters, mothers, because we've run juvenile programs, women's programs, men's programs. I get to see these real mothers, daughters, fathers, parents, God's children trying desperately to turn the page and not be identified by the worst decision of their life. But we want to, ad infinitum, judge these people for the worst decision they've ever made in their life and not allow them any path forward. And I think that's ludicrous. I think it's ungodly. I think and it doesn't do us any good, but have us, focus on negativity. So I don't know where I was going with that tirade, other than to say, 96% of these guys are getting out of prison no matter what. And do you want to incubate them in complete darkness, surrounded by violence for decades, and then just magically hope they're going to hit the streets and not reoffend? Or do you want to spend some time, years before they get out of prison, believing in them, infusing them with confidence, with self-esteem, with love, with belief, and unpacking the traumas and the situations that created this malice in the first place? And I would say, we're successful at it too. Like, I'm watching these guys become powerful young men who are capable of making our society a better place. There's no better human being who is fit to make a difference in the life of an incarcerated juvenile than these fellas. And some of our guys have gotten out of our program, gotten out of prison, and have taught our class at juvenile in Malibu at our Camp Kilpatrick program, which is our boys juvenile program. Delante and David, both who served 2 decades plus in prison, ran that program, and nobody gets through to those kids like those guys. And if you want to have the next generation not go back to prison and not create an entirely different, not recreate this exact scenario that's happened over decades, have formerly incarcerated credible messengers be doing the footwork, because that's who gets through to them. And I know I get fired up about this, but I don't understand why it feels so good for people to look down on the incarcerated.
I can tell you why.
Yeah.
I think it's it's an insecurity. It's because to me, when people are either insecure or in that same boat of lacking self-esteem, maybe they didn't commit crimes, but mentally, emotionally, they're in a similar place. When they see somebody that they can identify and feel like is below them, it makes them feel like they're above them. I really think it's that simple.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I think particularly this sounds strange, but in the poor white demographic, the people who are most fervently against what I do are almost always very poor white, because almost like from a caste system, someone's got to be below you. And they view the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated as below them, so they can talk disparagingly of them to sort of lift themselves up. I don't understand the logic, but that's clearly what's taking place.
Yeah. Have you had any failures, any guys that have gone through your program recidivism-wise that have ended up back in prison?
Yeah, we have graduated like 1,300, 1,400 guys.
Oh, wow.
Of those, we're not able to perfectly track who gets out of prison, but we have almost 30 guys who are professionals in the pet industry, which I'd love to talk more about later. The only guy I know of that went back to prison ended up back in our program at Cal City. So he was at Wasco, got out, and then he lost his family in a car accident. So I think lost his kids and his wife. He fell off the wagon, committed a robbery, ended up back in our program at another prison.
But the reason I ask is I love hearing both how passionate you are and the success that you have encountered with taking this, what I think most people would consider outside the box approach to rehabilitating incarcerated folks. What I am curious about, one of the things I talk about in my Unfuck America book is the prison system, far more from kind of a general standpoint, and kind of similar to the approach of dog shelters, is it saying, okay, there's a problem, right? There's an incarceration problem in this country. You can look at, there's not enough penalties, there's too many penalties. There's not stiff enough penalties, there's too stiff of penalties. You know, you can look at it from all these different sides, but clearly, you know, if you look at where the United States sits compared to, you know, any other Western society, or even, you know, non-Western or second or third world society, you know, we're at this weird level of absurdly high incarceration.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I think the simple or most natural question is why. One of the thoughts that I had, again, in this, maybe it's unrealistic, but just saying, okay, clearly we've tried all these different things and nothing seems to really resonate other than a program such as what you're talking about. One of my, I don't know that I would call it a concern, but a thought I have on it is that it's, you know, if you're to look at the prison population as a whole, as 100%, what percentage of that population would qualify and be good candidates for this type of program, do you think?
All of them.
All of them?
Almost all. I mean, the vast majority of our students have been convicted of loss of life crimes.
Yeah. 'Cause, I mean, to me, like hearing the success stories that you've had, to me, like that seems like a no-brainer. Like with that kind of track record and being able to say, hey, this isn't an idea, it's not a theory.
Yeah.
Like this put in practice works at a really, really high level. Why not do it? On the other side of the token, and I'll share my thought process on it here in a second, but is there any other is there any other method or environment that you can think of that would, at a minimum, reduce recidivism at a staggeringly high degree outside of your program?
Yeah. There are a few things. First off, what is most important and most required for recidivism to be successful is substance abuse programming. And what people don't understand is that drugs are absolutely ubiquitous in prison, more so than they are on the streets. And the number of people, one of my favorite students, shout out to the Suarez family, Tootie Suarez passed away June 2nd, 3 years ago. And the overdoses happen constantly.
Even
Whether
in
it's
prison?
Spice, fentanyl, heroin, speed, a lot of spice these days. A lot of
What is that?
A2. It's a synthetic plant essentially that you can smoke, but it causes psychosis.
Are ODs high even in prison?
Oh, they're astronomical.
Wow.
They're constant.
I mean, how do drugs get in primarily?
Visitation, mail, drone drops. We had a drone drop that ended up by our kennels. Our program got shut down for 8 months.
Wow.
3 racquetballs with fentanyl in them. Dropped from a drone. But I liked what you're getting at there, and I wanted to take a minute to kind of simply unpack this for people. Incarceration in America was not always what it is. It is a dark economy, similar to animal sheltering. And that's why I created Positive Change, was to have these two sort of dark entities of our culture work to cancel one another out. Help uplift these guys, put them on a trajectory of hope and employment, and help them save dogs that aren't able to be saved. You know, have these two elements work for one another. And I believe that there's way more integration in the future. We could have entire animal shelters at prisons. I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't. I'm really excited actually about building out some of that infrastructure where we could have real proper kennels. And then they'd be doing workforce development for boarding, training, daycare, et cetera, so that when they hit the streets, you know how big that market is. It's enormous. But in the 80s, we had the war on drugs. which essentially was a war on crime. And we were always stagnant at around a, 250,000, give or take, and it went up to 3 or so. And in the Reagan administration, with the war on drugs, that the perturbations began, right? And it sort of continued, but nothing too crazy. What happened is the Democrats needed to be successful politically. They had lost the presidency, right? And what was the ticket to that? It was tough on crime. The Republicans had firmly established themselves as tough on crime. The Democrats needed to take a page out of that book, so that's what they did. 94, Joe Biden comes in with the 94 crime bill as part of the Clinton administration, and that just absolutely charged everything. So the 94, that created mandatory minimums, truth in sentencing, 3 strikes, you're out, all of these radically punitive policies that, of course, if you look back now, not only have they not worked, they did worse than not work. The recidivism is 70+%, always has been, if not more. Entire communities have been devastated. There's 11 million children connected to incarcerated parents whose lives will never be the same. I mean, it went from 350, 400,000 rocketed up to just on a just crazy path to 2.6 million incarcerated Americans. So you got 25% of the world's incarcerated men are incarcerated in the United States of America. We're less than 4% of the population. 33% of all incarcerated women across the globe are incarcerated in America, not China or Russia or Turkmenistan. And with no real path forward for these individuals. You've taken adjudication out of the hands of the judges. They're not able to look at cases. It is, you are going to prison for this amount of time, regardless, we don't care. And we're going to tack on enhancements for gangs, 9.5 years for each weapon and for gang enhancements. That's crazy. I have students who are serving life on enhancements, not because of their crime, but because of the number of enhancements that are part of their crime. So we haven't done anything but lean into that over the last many years. We have done nothing but lean into this punitive model. And what I hear so many people, specifically on the Republican side, saying, and it almost is like cool culturally to say, which is, lock them up and throw away the key. I don't ever want to see him again. And we got to be tough on crime. And if these sons of bitches want to do X, Y, or Z, they better know that they got it coming. And okay, I get it. Totally understand where you're coming from. Totally get the reaction. Is that practical? Is that going to help us be safer? Is that doing what it's intended to do? The answer is unequivocally no. It has never succeeded. We don't have, our recidivism rates are abysmal. And, the country's never been more divided on this topic than they are now. And we have virtually no rehabilitation within the prison system to try to believe in these guys and get them on a path to redemption. One of the things which let me know the world isn't really ready for it is President Trump passed the First Step Act, which is a radically important act. I cannot stress how important this is. The First Step Act, which is a godsend to anyone on the left. It is a hyper-liberal policy that took a look at everything Biden created in 94 and said, you know what, this doesn't make a lot of sense. I think we should put adjudication back in the hands of judges. I think we should remove 3 strikes, you're out. I think we should have a look at nonviolent drug offenses and that we should reconsider these sentences. And that's exactly what he did. And you'll see Van Jones on CNN saying, if he does this, if President Trump signs the First Step Act to remove all these draconian policies, this will be the most amazing thing. And this is a bipartisan thing. We're all going to come together. I'm watching this happen in 2018. We get invited to the White House. It's all Democrat nonprofit organizations, all formerly incarcerated guys giving speeches. We're together for 4 or 5 hours, and there is this amazing event. President comes in, gives a bunch of speeches, and we're like, this is real progress, man, because this is going to trickle down to the states. And it also required programming. First Step Act, FSA programs get funding. You prove the efficacy of your program at the federal level, you get funding. So this program brought us into the Victorville Federal Correctional Complex, into the women's program. Thank you. Shout out Kevin McCarthy. And this is a huge deal. And so we're all there. And most of us are going to be doing media when we get home because we're at the White House. This is a big deal. Very end of it, he comes up on stage and he goes to give Sarah Huckabee Sanders a hug because she's resigning. And it's kind of an awkward moment because they don't really know how to be as human, right? And so it's this bit of a hug kind of thing, but it was awkward, right? No big deal, but it was awkward. And that's what gets covered in the media. Not a thing in the media about the First Step Act being signed. about utterly reversing at the federal level all of these draconian measures that created the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex is $110 billion juggernaut of our economy. I mean, it is the amount of money that is piled in, especially in California, $110,000 per inmate per year, just to lock them up. That's more than I make annually. It costs just to keep one person in prison. These are crazy numbers. And I bring that all that up to say that I'm not really sure people care on the whole, because here you have someone who got way out of his lane, took a huge risk by embracing what he believed to be correct, and it did nothing but bite him in the ass. He got no love from the media. The left didn't come together and say, hey, this is wonderful. We can work with this. And thank you so much for sort of moving everybody past this as a viable option. Because essentially what he's saying is, hey, I don't abide by all this draconian stuff either. But then sort of what I've seen happen since then is that swing back towards the hyper tough on crime, because he didn't really get the accolades and the rewards that he should have based on what he accomplished with the First Step Act. And we are seeing it trickle down to the states just like predicted. California is changing. Texas is changing. There's a lot of transitions into this program related, spiritual related. Let's believe in these guys. Let's give these guys some tool, kind of an approach. And that one really killed me, because it kind of revealed to me what the political landscape is. And they don't really care what he did for the betterment of this industry. I mean, this was the biggest move by far that's ever been accomplished in criminal justice space, and he got exactly zero love for it.
Well, I think it's a blatant spotlight on partisan blindness.
Yeah.
Is that, and both sides are guilty of it, but it's it's refusing to acknowledge anything positive of the other side. It's like, I would rather watch my ship sink, but just knowing that one's going to sink too and faster, and it's heartbreaking. Hearing you walk through the positive impacts, not just statistically, because that's, pretty non-emotional and it's a number, right? I mean, it's black and white. Even that's impressive, but to me, it's far more impressive hearing both how passionate you are and how effective the program is on kind of the emotional intelligence side of the actual inmate and what it does to change their life. Yeah. And I love it, and I think it should be far more prolific in all the prison systems. I do want to throw my idea at you, and I'm going to preface this with, I've never been to prison, I've never worked in a prison, I've never worked with prison inmates. Again, this is me looking at it as non-emotionally, completely detached, and as pragmatic as possible, with probably a less realistic expectation of it actually being implemented or even working. But again, when I look at the biggest issue and heartburn that I have with prison is that racial segregation, rampant drugs, violence, the dark energy that you talk about, it's this black hole fucking vacuum of evil. That everybody that I've ever had that's either been in prison or has worked as a CEO or a cop or whatever talks about. And it makes me think, okay, well, what is the goal? The goal is to not have people break the law, and if they do, for the consequence to fix the problem, right? And so, agreed, I've heard both sides of the political spectrum talk about tough on crime and throwing the book at people and, whatever. Clearly that hasn't worked to go from 300,000 to over 2 million. My thought process is, from having spent time in the Navy in environments that are truly fucking enough to break anybody's fucking spirit. My thoughts were, okay, obviously the $100 and some billion price tag is atrocious. I don't think extending time in prison, especially with the way prison is ever going to fix it, obviously, because it hasn't. It's been tried for 30 years now. When I think about the most miserable I've ever been and what that does to you psychologically, is that, okay, I still like your approach better, and I would say, to me, I would support having your type of program in every fucking prison out there to the best of our ability. And I would also preface it with saying that I would separate violent from nonviolent, right? And so this is only applicable to the violent people. Mm-hmm. If it's nonviolent, I guess it depends on what it is, but there would have to be some sort of criteria that would say that you would fall into or you would qualify for this type of prison environment, which is basically a cell with nothing in it. There's a hole in the ground, right? You're provided with
Middle East toilet.
What's that?
Middle East toilet.
A hole in the ground, and there's no bed. You don't have any clothes, and the ambient temperature is kept where you're just above hypothermia. And it's a 30-day sentence, right? So now it's not fucking 19 years. It's 30 days of being so fucking cold that you're ready to kill yourself. You're that fucking miserable. And then there's no TV. There's no free time. There's nothing. There's no skills.
But you're going to be alive.
You're going to be alive, but just barely, you know, and you're going to be absolutely fucking miserable. And the reason I say that is having seen some of our nation's most motivated, brightest, gifted, you know, some of the best men our country has to offer say, you know what, fuck this, I'm not doing it anymore because they're in that environment. And in a matter of hours, they're ready to say, I don't want to be a fucking SEAL anymore. Is that, you know, if you get out, like, and I will tell you, being 27 years removed from that environment, it feels like fucking yesterday that I was freezing my dick off. I mean, like,
that's a brilliant, even if we're just thinking about it for the sense of a conversation, it's a brilliant thing to think about. Because I think it would be radically more successful. I mean, you're going to have to get around, this is torture.
Yeah, the cruel and unusual punishment laws. And, you know, again, like, this is... But
it's already so cruel and unusual.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, again, like, I would argue, I mean, similarly to the debate of saying, is being in an overstimulated, frantic, chaotic, you know, if you put yourself in the dog's shoes, the dog doesn't understand what a fucking shelter is. Yeah. Like, is 9 years in that environment better than just putting the poor bastard to sleep? I don't know. You know, like, you could argue that, especially when you put yourself in the dog's shoes and realize that they don't understand what that is. But again, you know, to me, it would be interesting to do a pilot program or programs that says, okay, you have a 30-day sentence where you're in this environment where the thought of going back to that is enough to say, dude, I am not fucking going back there.
Yeah, you're going to definitely have to go to therapy afterwards.
Yeah.
I think that's even just as a thought exercise, that's interesting to think about. Because I think you're exactly right, you know? And we've tried to punish our way out of this forever, you know? And not only has it not worked, it's just made things catastrophically worse.
Yeah.
And we like to remove the humanity from prison. And by that, I mean, we like to take away their humanity and have no way to restore it. And when you're a person who does not have any humanity and does not have any hope, you better get out of the way. Yeah. If someone can't locate their humanity and has no hope, they are going to hurt you.
Yeah.
And they're going to have no problem hurting you because they've been hurting and suffering inside for so long that this is all they know how to do is to react with violence. Yeah. And when you're surrounded by violence and that's all you see are demonstrations of violence and that violence is essentially rewarded as well, you know, and it really sucks all the empathy and compassion and emotion and out of the room. You know, it leaves almost no room for it, which is why one of the reasons I give our dog programmers so much respect is because a lot of the guys, especially in our really high security spots, those guys are going out on a limb from their race and their gangs to enter into our program and do what they're doing. They're putting themselves at risk in some cases. And they're also doing everything possible to cultivate calm in that pod. They're doing everything possible to communicate with some of the staff too, which is not, you know, people are not okay with in some cases. They are cultivating calm for the sake of that dog because they know that dogs are all about energy. The dogs respond to energy. And if we're going to have only the energy of negativity and violence and threat in here, it's going to affect everybody and it's going to more quickly and more dramatically affect the dogs. So the guys have to go out of their way to use their own energy to control the energy of the pod. And that's one of the things that we did up at our new level 4 program at Tehachapi is that is one of the worst yards in the history of California, you know, a yard at Tehachapi. And because most of our guys have that pod, in other words, the dog, it's a smaller housing unit. And so almost all the guys in there are dog programmers. When you walk into that pod, it is a completely different feeling. It is a wholly different feeling than any of the other pods because those guys have really cultivated calm and gone out of their way to make it a productive environment for those dogs to heal and grow, and therefore making it a productive environment for them to heal and grow. Because what we allow in is vulnerability. Vulnerability is a liability in prison. If you lead with vulnerability, you're just making yourself Mark.
Target.
But what we've been able to do is really these guys lead with it now. And they say, I love you to their brothers. And they call themselves brothers. And they're there for their brothers. And they're dealing with whether it's flare-ups of addiction or gout. They're there for each other. And I see this happen day in and day out, and I see what happens when you identify someone's humanity and you encourage it. And they're off to the races. They're human. Everything is restored. And they get so excited about getting better. They get so excited about being that person they always wanted to be because they see it. It's like within reach, like, holy shit, I'm not identified by this past and what I did and being dressed in blue here or orange or whatever I'm not identified. I can move beyond this. And prison reform is about identifying someone's humanity, cultivating their humanity, giving them a space to grow their humanity and apply their humanity. Because right now we just have guys in prison doing the opposite, which is reacting out of violence and terror and fear 24 hours a day constantly.
So to me, maybe the third option would be a hybrid, right? Where you have the violent people that fit all the categories to do my 30-day project program. Everybody else goes into the humanity-based program.
Yeah, I like it.
Because to me, being, where there's drugs and there's, they're funneling women in somehow. They're like, people are getting laid. They're doing drugs. They're fucking assaulting each other. Like it's, to me, that consequence of being in that environment isn't enough. Whether it's not positive enough or it's not negative enough. It's like it's the worst of both worlds. And tacking time on clearly isn't fixing the problem.
No, and it's a real, people sometimes think I'm full of shit about the threats that exist. Tehachapi is a wildly violent place. Stabbings and altercations and fights. We had one class, there was 3 codes in one class. During one period of time, that's the alarms going off, everyone hitting the deck, cops running into flashbangs going off, all kinds of shit. 2 days ago, there's an individual who's incarcerated at Tehachapi, Tory Lanez. He's a rapper, and he's an individual that I've gotten to know over the years of being at that institution. And what I know of that individual is Tory has always tried to be there for other men on the yard. He's tried to support our program. He's tried to build a veterans program. This is an individual that has really gone above and beyond trying to help his fellow inmate and make the most out of his time utilizing his platform. And he got stabbed 14 times 2 days ago and medevac the Kern Medical Center, and both of his lungs collapsed. And so if you think like your celebrity or your influence or whatever will protect you in there, it will not. Yeah, he's someone who you never would have imagined would have been hurt like that. And it tears me up, man. All I could think about, I read it right before I got on the plane yesterday, and all I could think about, man, is I wish I could drive to KMC and see him. And just.
So he's okay, or he's survived as of now?
I saw on his Instagram that he's okay, and that he posted a really powerful, that he's moving forward strongly. But
in prison, you can post on Instagram?
Whomever his people are who are posting to let everyone know that he's okay. It's just wild. Not long ago, I was sitting down with him and another one of our students, Randy, talking about building the veterans program and how we might be able to get veterans coalesced into one unit at Tehachapi Prison and run a specifically veterans program, and he was going to help us support that. Tory is a perfect example of someone that everyone on the outside will take a look at Tory and go, oh, he's just this bullshit gangbanging rapper, blah, 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 who thinks he's the coolest thing in the world. That's not who that individual is. I've had many conversations with him, and he is a thoughtful, empathetic, loving, not full of himself individual who wants to try and help people while he's down. And try to help people who don't even necessarily fit with him ideologically or racially, which again is a risk. Yeah. And he goes out and he risks, because he knows it's the right thing to do. And I've genuinely seen Tory because he's because of his means and his resources, he's able to sort of help support different prison programs or think about supporting them. And he's, every time we talk, he's thinking about a different way to help.
What is he there for?
I'm not sure on the particulars of his crime. I know it was front page news or at least popular. I don't know the details though.
I definitely want to continue some of that kind of more higher level stuff. I am curious on the, again, going back to the logistics side, how do you actually house the dogs in prison?
Yeah,
how does that work?
Yeah, so the way we house dogs in prison obviously has to be figured out for each security, each type of security. It's going to be different at a level 4 180 than it will be. Level 4 180 is the most secure prison we have in California. 180 degrees of visibility, level 4 security. And so for places like that, we have airline crates. So the travel crates are lined up against the wall in the pod. They're in there from lights out, 10 o'clock to 5:30, roughly. Sometimes 6.
The dogs are crated during.
They're crated overnight, right? And then they are taken to evacuate, go for a walk on the yard early in the morning. They get a little bit of enrichment. Then they go to the kennels, which are outside. We have kennels built in the handball court area. While the guys go to chow. Guys will come back from chow, and then they're training for the rest of the day, moving, transitioning the dog to different trainers as needed. Some guys are going to go to school, go to work, go to programming, whatever. Dog's going to be handed off. So that's why we have 3 guys per dog, so that we make sure that dog, they're essentially training 14 and a half hours a day. Yeah. And then the rest of the time, the dogs are either, napping in their crates, in their kennels, or in their crates at nighttime. And then we have to adjust, like I said, if there's a lockdown, those officers still need to let our guys out. So the dog programs have a different level of flexibility and movement, So
it's definitely an incentive. Like if you're in that program, that's valuable, and you have way more freedoms and liberties, and like you would want to protect that. So the guys in that program are going to be doing it.
And, for the most part, to address what you had said about nonviolent and violent criminals, for the most part, they do attempt to separate that way. But if you're violent and you've been in there for a long time, if your offenses are violent, you can work your points down. So you can work your points down from a level 4 yard to a level 3 or a level 2, or in some cases on your way out of level 1. So the level of security isn't necessarily indicative of what your crime was. Although if you're at a level 4 or level 3, it was most likely a loss of life or a series of violent issues, But I will tell you, like, the most common student that I've had in there is a member of a gang who committed or was part of an accessory to a loss of life crime in their teens. Yeah.
Like they were the driver on a drive-by or
many
something.
Or they were pulled the trigger, whatever.
Right.
But they were in gangs, and there were fights, or there were drive-bys, or there were altercations that they took part in. And again, so many of our guys were juvenile lifers. So these were kids who were sentenced to die in prison as children for their crimes. That has been since walked back with a state bill, the Senate bill. So now it's unconstitutional to sentence a child to life in prison. So a lot of those guys are out now, and they're professionals. My buddy Nyet Vo, Oscar Rodriguez, Melvin Jones, a bunch of guys, Brian James, a bunch of guys that started their prison terms as children, served many decades, and are now out.
I apologize to keep coming back to this, but that makes me think maybe the solution for my idea would be it's a volunteer program.
Yeah.
To if you want to call it, skirt the cruel and unusual punishment, is especially in those cases you say, hey, you can reduce your sentence to 30 days if you're willing to do this and see how it goes. I don't know. Yeah. This probably sounds like a dumb question, but just as somebody who's worked and owned kennels for so many years, what happens if like a dog has explosive diarrhea in the crate? Like obviously there's so many things that you can't have in prison, whether it's pooper scoopers, fucking hoses to clean shit out. Like how do you deal with?
We get a lot of that stuff now.
Yeah,
we've been around long enough to where we have a lot of those materials that we need: brooms, hoses, things like we have plastic bags for poop. But yeah, man, the problem is commissary. Mm-hmm. Dudes. Everybody's got that intrinsic need to feed dog treats.
Bullshit.
And they feed them commissary, man. So diarrhea is like, I think we upped it to the number 1 item on on the list of shit not to do.
But I mean, that's got to be a nightmare to clean out if they're lined up in crates.
It happens a lot, but luckily they figured out, and they take great pride in it. Yeah. They take tremendous pride in what they're doing. And we've sent in, especially to California City. Again, shout out to Kim and Sam and Leah and Lisa and all the trainers that we had who really we had terrible dogs, fucking challenging, reactive dogs, that in some cases when they get plugged into the frequency of prison, which is dark, they can get worse. Yeah. There's a process of helping them get better. But yeah, we've sent in a lot of different types of dogs. Now, primarily, we have almost all large, because they're all coming from the euthanasia list. And most of those dogs are large young dogs. The vast majority of them. But pitties, shepherds, huskies, primarily.
Have you guys had instances where Inmates have been bit.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? Does the dog get washed out of the program?
The dog now gets washed out of the program depending on the circumstance. As long as they weren't provoked.
Okay.
Yeah. We had one just happen 2 days ago with Tank at North Kern State Prison. And
what happens to that dog?
So the dog comes back to the ranch or goes back into foster and they'll get adopted. Usually the circumstances are benign. Sometimes you get a lot of guys in prison that are on drugs and are just checked out. They're on a different planet. A different planet. And so you really have to protect yourself from some of those guys. There are other, EOP dorms and stuff like that in prison that are really dangerous people. What
is EOP?
Extensive outpatient.
Oh, okay.
Mental health issues. It just makes it very unpredictable with what you're dealing. You don't know what you're going to deal with. So engaging with them and a dog can be really difficult. But they're in the housing unit next to us.
Okay, so they're close enough to where they're interacting with the dog sometimes.
Yeah.
Have you had on the other side of the token any instances of inmates mistreating dogs or making mistakes where they get shit canned from the program?
We had one person who we asked to leave the program, and he couldn't get past his old school mentality about how you correct a dog. We don't allow for corrections anymore. We used to, but guys would take a shortcut to correction, because as you know, in dog training, like there's a trust factor, there's a connection factor, there's a deliberate nature to which you have to go through your checks, right? And if you just want to get lazy and just correct, leash pop a dog or snap correct him real hard, you might achieve what you're going for in that moment, but long term you're hurting yourself. And certainly, especially how the energy is in there, if you're that kind of a person or you're used to that, because it's the intention behind it. And when they get their energy, if it's impatient energy, they're
clotheslining a dog. Yeah.
But nothing violent has happened. We've just had, too firm of corrections, which we had asked that person to leave. And it was this other students who made that happen. It wasn't anybody else. We've had dogs bite we had a dog, and sometimes we just have strict parameters for interacting with the dogs that aren't followed. And sometimes in the beginning it was racial. We had a handler of one race with a really tough Great Dane pit bull and a person of another race, and everyone knew not to mess with that dog, especially when he was training, and definitely not to get near his face. This is a dog that had very little structure, and if you put your face near his, he wasn't thinking about licking you. This is a threat. This is a direct, couldn't be more direct threat. And everybody in that pod knew it. And this person, of course, grew up with pitties or something. So he had a bond with this dog from across the room, meaning he was interested, but he was really arrogant and flippant about it. And he said to the handler, I'm going to pet you. He goes, "Sir, please don't." And he basically said, F off, called him a bunch of names. And this was a person of a different race who very much so was pushing him around. And then he went and did his thing, and dog bit him right in the face immediately.
Bad? Yeah. What haven't I asked you about this program that I should have or that you'd like to talk about?
Let's go. All right, man. Here's something that's very important to think about when it comes to incarceration, employment, recidivism, making America a safer place, getting people set up on a trajectory of hope and opportunity. What we've always wanted in the criminal justice space is a pillar of America's economy that's willing to accept the formerly incarcerated and incarcerated, right? We were promised oil and gas for a while. We're going to have technical careers within that field that we'll educate guys on. Never happened. Then we're going to have technical careers around renewables, air, wind and solar. That never happened. So as a country, we need an economy that is big enough and healthy enough to accept these individuals, to provide them a real chance at redemption and being productive members of society. Enter the pet industry. The pet industry is in many ways, at least tacitly, built on second chances, right? It's a $100+ billion industry that is recession proof, that in 2008 grew 15%. In 2020, as the stock market dipped 18%, it grew 25%. If you graph it on a chart, it's a 45-degree angle, and the trends are that people are going to have more pets than ever and fewer children, right? So this industry isn't going anywhere. Where do we stand with behaviorists, trainers, technicians? 15% deficit year over year. We are nowhere near meeting the needs of canine professionals within the pet industry. And I'm talking about any type, pet walkers, pet sitters, acute training behaviorists, dealing with reactivity, et cetera, or just structured trainers going through the A, B's, and C's, or just general structure. The need for that is radical. And so what I quickly discovered in Positive Change when guys started getting out of prison in 2016, 17, is they got right into the pet industry as small business owners. Boom, entrepreneurs, one after the next, after the next. Black and brown gang members who spent their entire lives gangbanging from Compton, from Watts, from all over the place, entering the pet industry successfully and being of service to the animal sheltering and rescue communities. They're almost all exclusively training reactive dogs that shelters and rescues can't handle. So they're providing a huge service. They're getting paid. It's an entrepreneurial space that is absolutely ripe for the taking. And we have a real source. There are thousands of dog programmers in the California penal system who don't have an outlet towards employment. So moving forward, what I'm going to be focusing on is employment in the pet industry. Every one of our guys who's wanted to get into the pet industry has done so successfully, either working for LA Canines with Colleen and Dave, or all these different businesses, or starting their own, and in some cases hiring the students they used to work in prison with. I mean, real remarkable things have happened. These guys are immense assets in their community. What Jamal is doing in Long Beach, what Oscar's doing in LA, and Vo in Riverside, these guys are killing it. And there is no reason that we can't continue this momentum in an even better way and hopefully address some of the felony hiring restrictions that exist at the Petcos and the PetSmarts. But what I'm getting at is the pet industry has a need for specialists. We can help fill that need. Because the culture and the social nature of the pet industry is accepting. And we have people who want to work with our formerly incarcerated trainers before they want to work with the other trainers. They'll always call or message and say, hey, I want to work, my dog, blah, 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 blah. I really want to work with one of the Positive Change guys. So if we continue to grow this, if we continue to expand this into every prison, because every prison is in a community with an animal shelter, every single one of them. Yeah. There's no reason why we shouldn't be working together and even expanding on the sizes of the kennels that these guys are operating in there, especially at level 1, 2 facilities. So I really see this as a viable way for us to make a difference in the community, to start to employ at a massive level formerly incarcerated dog trainers, but to also move the needle culturally to help solve the animal sheltering and rescue problem by pulling marginalized communities into animal sheltering and welfare. Like, I've been a part of this community for a couple of decades, and our tendency is to blame other communities. It's the Mexicans on the east side who don't culturally agree with us. Their dogs are running around everywhere fucking, and they're creating the problems. Or it's the poor whites in Oildale that are creating the problems. It's always racialized or socioeconomically blame. You blame someone. That's not us. Yeah, it is you and your Labradoodles and your Huskies. Trust me, it is you. Okay? It is you. So yeah, that's essentially what I'm getting at. Is we can pull in these marginalized communities by virtue of, because again, these guys are coming from Watts, they're coming from Oakland, they're coming from all these communities that we've blamed the problem on, and by graduating Positive Change guys, putting them back into their community as professionals, we're helping move the needle culturally to where their neighborhood and their culture now better understands animal sheltering, rescue training, what the whole situation is, and they're able to make a difference. Like Dante was a. I mean, if you look at him on paper, right, the baseball statistics of his incarceration are gang member, part of Velosa life crime, served 19 years in prison. He was 14 when he went to prison. Wow. Dante just opened the first and only dog rescue in Compton called Canine Hub. Oh, shit. These are real things that are happening. He's really involved with Compton City Council. He's really moving the needle, and that's going to change things in Compton. That's because Compton serves the same shelters that I grew up pulling dogs from. So there's a lot of reasons why Positive Change and programs like Positive Change are important, and they can really serve to be a radical variable for anti-recidivism. I mean, a radical variable, because what people need to be successful in prison are hope and opportunity. That doesn't exist in there. It almost doesn't exist. And we can provide that. And with hope and opportunity, you're no longer a liability to yourself focusing on all the negative. You're an asset to your society because you're focusing on what you're going to be able to do when you get out there.
Dude, I got to tell you, that's fucking amazing. Like, I mean, it almost gives me goosebumps hearing you talk about it.
I also really want to touch on like what people, I don't mean to interrupt, man. No. It's giving me like, these guys are on a path to discover and nurture their own humanity, which has been suppressed the entire time they've been incarcerated. They've been told over and over again, you are worth less. You are nothing but a liability to this society, and you better not think good of yourself. So to watch what happens when you introduce hope and when you believe in people, when you genuinely get in there every day and believe in people, tell them you love them. Where I hear I love you more than anywhere else on this planet is in prison. Wow. We have established a culture and community of support that is, I love yous when I see yous. I love yous when I'm out of here.
It's really hard for me not to make a joke about that.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not gonna though, because you're on a roll.
It's not that bad, I swear. But the point I'm making is that these guys are really take it upon themselves to rebuild these animals. They are responsible for a sentient life that has been traumatized. And you watch them take on this responsibility with a dedication that is unparalleled, because it's all they have in many cases. It's right in front of them. And in many cases, it's all they have. And it's not just a beacon for them to invest in, but it's giving them back this unconditional love that they've been dying for, And you watch it like positively metastasize, and you watch how it spreads to the other pods and to the other guys. And all of a sudden you have this environment that is truly uplifting across the board, where the guys are supporting each other, the dogs are supporting the guys are supporting the dogs, and all they talk about is what's next. What's next from a positive standpoint, as opposed to who we going to get after on the yard or this, that, or the other. I mean, they are myopically focused on progress. And all you got to do is just introduce some of it, believe in them, and introduce some hope and opportunity, and the rest will take care of itself.
Like I said, it's fucking incredible. I'm curious, do those positive examples and success stories incentivize, motivate, inspire other incarcerated folks that now they want to do? They see these guys doing stuff.
Time. Yeah. I mean, I hope Isaac doesn't care too much that I share this, but like, Isaac was a big time bad dude there, a dude of respect. And, he was a soldier, for a long time. And to have him come off the yard and focus on the dog program and put his all into it, and then get out of prison and be as successful. I mean, he is so successful. He's in Riverside, San Bernardino County, but he built a kennel. He's got 10 spots in his kennel. He's hired his family. He is constantly serving rescue. But what he did in that prison system to come off as a guy like that, with that kind of respect, and dedicate himself to a cause greater than himself, was really important. And then to get out of prison and become so financially successful. So a bunch of the guys have come back and shared their stories about how they got successful, what they're doing. And we really use that to let them know, hey, this is all waiting for you out there. And what I'm looking to do in the next chapter of my life is exactly that, is more services related to employment. So really making sure not just positive change guys, but guys who were part of any dog programs, Paws for Life, the one that CCM, any of the facilities, that we can help establish this prison to employment pipeline within the pet industry, because it's there, it's ripe for the taking, and these guys are built for it. And from a small business ownership, entrepreneurial standpoint, I'm really excited about that, because these guys, how better do you change the cultural landscape? How you move that needle by having real life examples out there in the streets. And what's really beautiful about it too is the relationship one has with their dog is holy. There are few relationships that are as holy as a person and their dog, especially if you really invest in that connection. And what these guys have become is experts in that. There's no other place where you connect like a dog with a dog than in prison. When you're in prison and you're in your house, in your room, and the rest of that dog, it's so pivotal to their existence. They root down in that connection to a degree like I've never seen anybody. We all think we connect with our dogs pretty well. When it's the only thing you have, you should see and feel the levels at which these guys communicate and bond and earn trust from their dogs. It's really remarkable. So they're showing us how to love our animals. Really, That's what they're doing in their teaching sessions, is showing their clients how better to love and connect and earn trust from their animals.
Yeah, I think hearing you talk about that resonates with me for sure, because you see a similar side of that with, police and military handlers similarly, when they're trusting their life and their brothers in arms' lives on a dog's shoulders. Yeah. Same kind of thing, it's just like, and especially like the military guys that when they're deployed and spending months and months and months, sleeping with a dog on a cot and, basically moving from outpost to outpost and, the dog's on a leash and they're with them 24/7. And yeah, just that bond and relationship that they have is so fucking cool.
Yeah, totally.
I will say, if there's anything that I can do in the sphere or realm of what we do, whether it's, donating online memberships to any of the guys or figuring out a way to supply food to your programs or any of that, please let me know, because I would love to help, especially if they're, I don't know what you guys feed. I don't know if it varies, but
it does vary.
But yeah, getting them on a good food may help with the constant diarrhea problem
absolutely.
also. But
we now have a consistent, we've had different contracts with food where we've been able to, because that's critically important to have the same food, obviously. Where we've, contracts have sort of come and gone, and right now I think we're just down to buying Kirkland or something from Costco, which I'm not thrilled about.
Yeah, we have the ability to drop ship pallets, and if there's a way we can figure out to,
I would love to talk with you about that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
like we could send it straight to the prison,
and I think the guys would really get a kick out of, we can't play movies or anything like that in there. We don't have access to the internet. Certainly the guys that are out, giving them access to, a lot of guys understand dog psychology through Caesar and elements of dog psychology and sort of that structure, and they're hungry.
Yeah,
hungry for anything.
Yeah, I'd donate books, memberships, hook them up with food, treats, supplements, the whole thing. So we'll talk
because
afterwards.
There is a next level of connection that
for sure,
that a working dog handler has. Like you said, they really root into that because it's can be life and death.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk afterwards more on the logistics on that, but just know that's an open invite. I do have a note about the Operation Kabul rescue, which I would love to ask you if you can talk about that. I don't know if there's any.
Yeah, I think enough time has gone by that I'm allowed to talk about that. We were not allowed to talk about much of it when it took place, but do you remember the news?
Oh, God, yes.
After we pulled out of Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Remember the news the next day? The tarmac with all the...
Oh, yeah. I got a million messages about that, yeah.
So for months up to that, we had an evacuation plan. The United States government, the United States military would not support any sort of a mission. The only way to get a mission carried out was for us to take it on ourselves. So we're working with Kabul Small Animal Rescue and this remarkable American named Charlotte who lives in Kabul and runs Kabul Small Animal Rescue. SBCA International, run by my good friend Lori, and they have a lot of means. They have reach. They have a really wonderful board. And the goal at that point, so imagine we're still in Afghanistan. We've just left Bagram. So logistically, we're fucked because that was where you could pull off a whole lot of evacuations and exits. And with that gone, we're just focusing on HKIA, and there's very little you can do out of that airport. So our goal was all these animals had accumulated, right? These are, some of these are security working dogs, about 40 of them. The rest are embassy dogs, staff, dogs, adopted cats, dogs, from interpreters, a whole mishmash. Some from Kabul Small Animal Rescue, almost 300 animals that we are trying to get out of Kabul before America leaves. And we're coordinating and we're trying to make this work. And we got Edwards Air Force Base, which is right around the corner from me, that I've grown up at because my dad, I'll tell you a fun story about a Ukrainian MiG-29 if you want later. But long story short, in communicating with some incredible people at Edwards, who were in intelligence, and some incredible people at the Mojave Air and Spaceport, which is where Virgin Galactic, the spaceship companies, Scaled Composites are. So we had two ways to land. We had two places to land in America that would take 300 animals and potentially some humans, interpreters, other people like that were connected to the embassy, where we would be able to take them. But there were rules, right? So we couldn't have foreign nationals at an Air Force base. They couldn't touch the tarmac. So then we're going to work around and have different people from immigration and naturalization come from LA out to Edwards or so we had plans. We had a backup plan, which was Mojave Air and Spaceport to land, and all the gears were turning. The problem is during COVID, the CDC passed this completely illogical rule that disallowed the import of dogs from 114 countries. So all of a sudden, if you're trying to bring an animal in, doesn't matter if it's yours, if it's an American animal. If it's coming from one of 114 countries, it's not allowed into the United States, period. So we try to get around that. Hey, these are American. This is the situation. So we think we're going to be okay. We think we might be able to make it work. We had some, Laura Trump was another person that stepped up to help and has never asked me for, she's really been a helpful person just across the board. And we had it all planned out. Russian IL-76 aircraft that we're renting with a Russian crew, and we got all the coordinates, and we're talking with all the guys that are there, and this thing's moving along. So much so, like one of the days we were on the phone with everybody. It was myself and Lori and somebody from, I forget exactly who was on the phone, but the commander says to us, "Hey, we've got to go quiet. Something bad's about to happen." And we said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean? Like when do we? This is all real quick." And he goes, "Just in 10 minutes, turn on CNN." And that's when Abbey Gate blew up. And so they, this was like in some way anticipated, some sort of intelligence. So all these things are happening real time at HKIA and all this coordination. And we're not sure if we're going to get approved, but we've got this mission planned and we're ready to land in Kabul and we're ready to pick up the animals. It's not far for them to get from Kabul Small Animal Rescue to the airport. And then at the last minute, we get a letter from Rochelle Walensky from the CDC that says your mission. And then it went all the way up, from what I was told, to the Joint Chiefs of Staff who approved the mission.
Oh, wow.
That's what I was told. And we just get a 2-sentence letter from her that says your mission's been canceled. It's not possible. It's not happening. And so it was devastating, to say the least. But we weren't going to give up, and SPCA International was incredibly dedicated to this. Thank Dog I'm Out, Rain Coast Rescue. These are small organizations, teeny organizations. And we just got together. We said, we're going to fucking make this happen. Like, this is going to happen. And Charlotte hadn't given up. And that woman has
lady balls of steel.
Bigger balls than me, dude. Really an impressive woman. I want to tell you that when we pulled out, you guys think it was that Marine who was the last person to leave HKIA. It was not. It was Charlotte. Charlotte was the last person to leave that base. Through the little blast thing, she was handed off to the Taliban. She did not have a wrap, so she couldn't cover her face. So she's leaving HKIA with her arm covering her face with a puppy under her arm. Taliban takes her after she gets through the little chicane thing, the little blast chicane, and they pick her up a pizza and drop her off at her rescue. And then we have to go back months later, and we start to coalesce a plan again. So we've got to coordinate with Charlotte, with the Taliban, with SPCA International. We still have to let America know what's happening. So there's loose communications there. And again, we've secured a gigantic cargo aircraft, an IL-76 Russian aircraft that we rented from them. We've got all the logistics taking place. Those dogs were all let out. So all the dogs that were stored at the airport who were ready to leave, they were all let out. So you saw on the tarmac, Malinois and Shepherds meandering around on the tarmac. What happened was the Taliban gathered most of those dogs up. Some of them were killed, some of them were shot, but the others were gathered up and repurposed. Because in order to open the airport, you need security working dogs. And Qatar was working really, really hard to open the airport. The Qataris did an amazing job there to get that place functional. But in terms of those dogs, it was a little bit of a fib because they were just repurposed to handlers who had no connection to these dogs whatsoever. And they're all of a sudden
bomb dogs
working now or whatever. But the rest of those dogs were regathered up. As many of them as we could, we trapped and gathered, or Charlotte and her team did. Some of the Taliban guys did as well. Gathered up 276 dogs and cats. And we got our mission approved, through the powers that be on that end. And right as we're getting going, the Russians started mounting at the border. And we got 36 hours before we're supposed to push. And now Russia says there's no way you're landing with foreign nationals in Russia. We were going through Moscow and Siberia on the way home. And they said, you can't, no foreign nationals are landing in Russia. So you're fucked. Figure out a different. And we have an all Russian crew on our plane. Former special forces guys on our aircraft. This is another wild story. So we don't know what to do. And we know that everything's fucked. The whole plan is fucked now. Because now the only way we can go through is Ankara and Iceland.
Wow.
Nobody knows anyone. So I get on the phone to my buddy Dev, who's just a rescuer. He's also in the military in Turkey. Incredible dude. Shout out Dev Naz. And I call him up, and he's got a Aussie accent. And I said, hey, bro, is there any way you're near Ankara? He goes, yeah, mate. What do you need? And I go, bro, we need veterinarians to do checks on 276 animals that are landing from Kabul in less than 36 hours. He goes, hey, fellas. And he kind of explains, and he goes, right. Yeah, we'll turn around, mate. We'll be down there in about 4, And he just fucking turns around. Yeah. Happens to be with a crew of veterinarians. They land. Our Russian pilot has COVID, and there's a snowstorm. So he's got to get off. We got to wait for a new, sorry, let me back up. So in order to make this trip happen, we had to come up with a new flight plan. Like I said, we had 36 hours to come up with a flight plan, which was Ankara and Iceland. Only way we can make that happen is if these people come on board. We got them to come on board to meet the aircraft when it landed. So aircraft takes off from Kabul, lands in Ankara. Dev and his whole team get on board. Pilot gets off with COVID. They wait and bring on another pilot. By now, we're way over the time limit that we're supposed to be flying with these dogs already, and we've only had one stop, right? Driving snowstorm. They take off, though, fly to Iceland, land in Iceland. I meet the aircraft in Iceland. Bunch of veterinarians and techs came over from England. So they get on the plane. We're doing all the checks, giving medicine, checking the working dogs had a really hard time. Yeah. That was a really, really long time to be on that plane. Those security dogs, that was a long time. And shout out Jeff Barry from No Dogs Left Behind. He did a really good job, working with those dogs and taking those dogs on at the end, in terms of having virtually no resources, but he took on something that was extraordinarily challenging. But we landed in Iceland, took care of all their checks, and then because we weren't allowed to land in America, we weren't allowed to come to America. Thank you, America. We had to land in Vancouver. So that flight from Iceland and I'm on the top of all the kennels. So they're stacked 3 high, 276 animals. You can imagine how loud it is in there. And our Russian crew, they're smoking cigarettes. They're drinking, it's wild. They're fully naked, changing and stuff. They were cool guys, man. And we really tried at first, because one of our guys that was on board, was 3 of us. It was me. One of the guys was British Special Forces. And so, everybody's kind of feeling each other out. What's this person all about, And we ended up getting along just fine.
Then the vodka starts flowing.
Yeah, it did too. Yeah, not with me. But so we landed in Vancouver, and Signature FBO gave us their entire base of operations, essentially. And SPCA International, Thank Dog, and Raincoast ran an animal shelter out of the airport at YVR International Airport for 4.5 months until everybody got reunited with their animals, and all the other animals were adopted.
Dude, that's crazy, man.
And it's never been on the news. Yeah. It's never been covered. People have no idea any of this happened. But, I really hope we can get this story out to more people, because what it really demonstrated is that a couple small organizations with enough gumption and balls can pull off like the impossible. And people told us from the very get-go, like even when we'd end up with people in the United States military or in the State Department where they're going, hey buddy, like, do you realize what you're fucking trying to,
You may end up on camera fucking with your hands tied behind your back and fucking getting your head cut off.
But it wasn't just that. It was the like meandering around in business that's supposed to be the United States governments. Yeah. Like what are you doing having the balls to think you can?
Yeah. No, I mean, we saw a lot of that with getting interpreters and other people that helped and or supported the military that got left behind, where there was a ton of veteran organizations.
I saw that. Yeah,
getting, Pineapple Express. And I mean, I've had several guys on the show that similarly, like basically the government was like, yeah, tough shit, and they're like, all right, well, we'll fucking figure it out. And, stand up command centers in their garage and, spend 2 weeks doing the same kind of stuff. But
it was interesting while it was happening too, because, the guys went over there. There's 3 of us on the plane, and 2 of the guys had to go to Kabul for the aircraft to take off, and guide the aircraft out and spend time with the Taliban. And their experiences were not what, like, necessarily of course, all the rigid ideology and dogma associated with fervent religiosity was there. But in terms of being able to communicate, like have a rational conversation, that was all there. Yeah. And they weren't trying to, the only thing they cared about was some of the dogs that were necessary for the airport to be open. Yeah. Other than that, they seemed amicable to this idea of getting these animals out.
That's surprising. I mean, I'm surprised they didn't just kill all of them, other than the ones that they wanted to keep and needed. It's surprising that they didn't do that.
One thing I wanted people to understand is when that happened, when we pulled out of Afghanistan, I'd never been more depressed to be an American. I had such a hard time, and I know everybody did, kind of experiencing that. Yeah. And what I really wanted people to know is that, is about Mission Possible and what we were able to do as just individuals who believed in it. And then also what friends of yours and the Tim Kennedys and all the other people that took it upon themselves to go back and be there for those who were about to be forgotten. I don't think enough of those stories got told.
Agreed. Like I said, we've had several people on the show that have done that more than once, and I agree. Like I think there's a reason the media doesn't cover it the same way that mainstream media didn't cover the First Step bill.
First Step Act. Yep.
Man, Zach, I tell you, like I knew this would be a good interview, but just blown away by everything that you've done and accomplished, how inspiring all of your work is, and I think most surprising, not even surprisingly, I would say in that same vein, the most inspiring thing is just how effective your program is at giving incarcerated inmates a second chance and motivation to not go back and be productive members of society. I think it's so fucking awesome, everything that you've done and accomplished, and it's an honor to have you on.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be here, man.
Yeah, and I do have some parting gifts for you there.
Go. I was hoping for.
Yeah, the old challenge coin.
Zach saw me checking out the coin corner.
Yeah.
I wondered if I was going to get hooked up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you don't
give me tattoo ideas. What's going on? Buddy?
Maybe.
Let's go.
Maybe I'll get the lower back fucking piece that I've always wanted. The tramp stamp.
Oh, what, dude? No way.
Yeah, you don't seem like a shit kicker kind of guy with the Vans hat and shoes, but
believe it or not, I got quite a few versions of myself. I got cowboy boots, I got cowboy hats, I got horses.
Yeah. Well, should you find yourself rocking that, I'd love to see a picture of it.
I love it, dude. I got a Rui Doso belt buckle that is similar.
Oh, nice.
This is rad.
Yeah,
man.
good shit.
That's awesome.
Well, again, thank you for coming. Appreciate the story. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so, man. Is there anything? No. I mean, this has been a long conversation. I love that there's something different about doing a podcast when you can take some breaths and communicate and not feel like you're at any sort of a pace.
That's the only way to do it, in my opinion. Is the long form. No hard time out. Like you see on mainstream media, or even like a lot of Zoom interviews that have an hour and you got to squeeze everything in and it's got to be in person. It's just totally different, and I mean that's why I do it the way I do it.
Yeah. Well, it's very effective, man. I had a really good time being here, and thanks, bud.
Yeah. I appreciate you coming, man. To the listener, viewer, as always, I hope you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, you can choke yourself. And until next time, this is Mic Drop.